The bill is passed.
After months of delays in GOP infighting, the U.S. House voted Saturday to provide $95 billion to allies abroad, a major win for the White House and Speaker Mike Johnson. In a rare move, Democrats crossing the aisle to help Republicans clear a series of foreign assistance bills. The package would provide $61 billion to help Ukraine fight Russia, $26 billion for Israel just days after Iran attacked the Jewish nation, and $8 billion for the Indo-Pacific, where the rise of China has national security experts worried. A fourth bill bans TikTok if its Chinese owner doesn't divest, and changes some foreign assistance into a loan, an idea first floated by former President Donald Trump.
We turn our backs right now. The consequences could be devastating. This afternoon, the House acted. We sent over to the Senate, and it will be transmitted shortly.
The vote landing Speaker Mike Johnson in trouble with some in his own party, particularly those who remain skeptical of helping Ukraine.
Shame on the American government. And our military and our government should care about protecting the national security of the United States of America and the Americans that pay their hard-earned tax dollars to fund all of this.
Supporters, however, arguing that the package protects national security in the long run.
If you want peace, give the Ukrainians the strength to stop Putin.
On Saturday, Senate leaders unveiling a plan to take up the package this Tuesday. But in the halls of Congress, speculation about whether Speaker Johnson can even keep his job is what's dominating hobby pod chatter. A band of MAGA-aligned conservatives threatening to oust him as Speaker any day now.
This is like a ratchet. The pressure will just keep building. The Speaker's overdrawn on political capital, and he's going to go bankrupt after this vote.
Watch breaking news on YouTube. Subscribe to ABC7 Chicago Eyewitness News.
The bill is passed.
After months of delays in GOP infighting, the U.S. House voted Saturday to provide $95 billion to allies abroad, a major win for the White House and Speaker Mike Johnson. In a rare move, Democrats crossing the aisle to help Republicans clear a series of foreign assistance bills. The package would provide $61 billion to help Ukraine fight Russia, $26 billion for Israel just days after Iran attacked the Jewish nation, and $8 billion for the Indo-Pacific.
Well, everybody, I think we've had enough of seeing that on the screen, haven't we? Of course, we got two outstanding guests today, Carl Zaw and Scott Ritter, waiting backstage. But I just want to chat with you guys for a moment here, just to give you some figures that I've gone over in the last couple of hours. Let's have a look at how much money the Americans are burning here. Since 2014, the U.S. government has spent over $300 billion, or $80,000 per second, or that works out to, well, let's round it off to about $4.6 million per minute. If that number doesn't scare you, I don't know what does. And by the time I finish this live stream, we would have burned up about $121 billion in the national debt of America. Oh my, oh my. Let's bring on a couple of gentlemen that can help us figure this out. And as you know, this is called The Gloves Are Off, and they definitely are. Carl's on the program here and Scott Ritter. Gentlemen, I remember last week, you know, it was probably one of my greatest live streams because, well, I just sat back and listened to you guys chat all the time, and it was amazing. We got such good response. We're going to start off with Scott tonight. Scott, was this the response that the Iranians were expecting?
Which response? The Israeli response?
Yeah. Was that it? Is that it? Is that all they got? Or, I mean, is there more to this?
Well, first of all, if you think that that's all the Israelis are going to do or are capable of doing, then you don't know the Israelis. The Israelis have spent a lot of time carrying out a very advanced covert action program targeting Iran on a number of levels, targeting Iran's nuclear infrastructure. People only have to remember Stuxnet, the virus that the Israelis were involved in inserting into the Iranian centrifuge program. There's been other viral attacks, computer viruses. There's been infrastructure attacks where Iran has, infiltrated a variety of either explosives or other destructive techniques designed to destroy nuclear infrastructure. Israel's been assassinating Iranian scientists inside Iran. Israel's been working with ethnic minorities and religious minorities inside Iran, and working with other political factions to foment unrest inside Iran. We had a major outbreak of violence last year that many in the West tried to pawn off as just an example of internal unrest and dissent. And no, it was actually orchestrated from the outside in by Israel and Western intelligence services for the purpose of undermining and hopefully overthrowing the Iranian regime. So Israel has been playing this game for some time now, and they will continue to do so. They will continue. They will accelerate this process. What happened, I believe, was just purely a face-saving mechanism. Something that Benjamin Netanyahu would say, "There, we responded." So that internally he could hold this coalition together. I think without some sort of demonstrative response, this coalition would have collapsed, and that would have been a political disaster for Netanyahu. But I think we have to be careful about gloating over superficialities and without understanding the reality of this. Israel's at war with Iran. And it's a war that Israel has been waging for some time now. Iran is at war with Israel. Iran's been waging a war against Israel as well. They've been using the axis of resistance, Hezbollah, to put pressure on the border. There's death and destruction being dealt out on a daily basis on the Lebanese border. I mean, anybody who thinks that Israel doesn't pack a punch doesn't understand anything about Israel or how Israel operates. It's far too easy. People go, is that all Israel has? Israel has a hell of a lot more than that. They just opted politically not to deploy it at this time. There will be a time and place. There could be a time and place where Israel does opt to go full bore. This wasn't it. Israel's in a very precarious situation with its political relationship with the United States. It doesn't want to put that at risk. Israel's military is stressed in Gaza against Hezbollah. It doesn't need a full-scale war with Iran right now. So what Israel did was actually a stroke of political genius. People can mock it all they want. Israel doesn't care. As I said, Israel has capabilities that they will continue to use to attack Iran. If the Iranians think this is over, then they're wrong. But the Iranians aren't stupid. They know this. They know what Israel's been doing. They know what's going on. This was a little bit of a superficial song and dance that took place the other day. That's it. It doesn't. It's not indicative of either Iranian strength or Israeli weakness. It just means that they're trying to close this one chapter, but the book is still left to be read.
Interesting analysis, and I appreciate that, Scott. And Carl, if you want to join in anytime, come on in, sir. Definitely great to have you on the program. I'm going to just touch about what happened here on the weekend in the House of Representatives. They passed this bill. We saw it, approximately $95 billion, over $60 billion for Ukraine. We saw some money go towards Taiwan as well, and of course to Israel, and a bit of a ban on TikTok, actually telling a Chinese company to pretty much sell their company up and leave. Does any one of you gentlemen want to maybe give us your analysis of what all that means on the weekend, if this is actually going to pass, and where those funds are they going to make a difference? Any one of you guys want to take a shot at it?
Well, I'm just here to learn from Scott, so I like to hear Scott's opinion first before I put in my 2 cents.
Okay, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I'm going to withhold judgment on TikTok and anything dealing with China till I hear Carl's input. But when it comes to this, look, let's back up. I was asked by a senior diplomat last December what I thought about the funding bill for Ukraine, and at that time I said that you can't evaluate any of this from the standpoint of traditional national security, benchmarks. This is not about foreign policy, national security policy. This is about domestic American politics. That this funding had got caught up in the silly season of American presidential politics. And at that time, border security was the hot button topic, and this money had been taken hostage by the border security issue, and it wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. At that time, I said I don't think that we could be talking about any realistic release of this money until April. Turns out I was right. But now what changed? I mean, let's ask the following question: where's border security now in the national dialogue? I mean, back in the late fall, early winter, in the January, February here, all we talked about is border security. Hell, there's an invasion coming across the border, thousands of military units, a lot of Chinese military age men coming across. The whole world's falling, Chicken Little, sky's falling, da-da-da. When was the last time you heard anything about border security? I mean, real panic from the Republicans. You've got a couple people, Marjorie Taylor Greene and others are out there screaming, but it sort of disappeared. Donald Trump, is he talking about it? What happened is that the Republicans overplayed their hand. The Democrats responded by saying, we're ready to make meaningful compromises, but you're holding it up. And meanwhile, you're holding up Ukraine. The Mayorkas impeachment fizzled out. And so suddenly the Republicans who were holding a strong hand haven't played their cards very well. And the issue has fizzled out. Meanwhile, a couple of things happened. One, Ukraine was getting the snot kicked out of it by the Russians. And every major media outlet. And again, people need to understand when Western media suddenly changes its tune, it's not because they became smart. It's because their masters said, we have to change the thematics. So how do you put pressure on the Republicans? You get the New York Times to run a front page story, say the Ukrainians are losing. For the first time, Wall Street Journal, they're losing. Everybody, they're losing. They're losing. Why? There's no weapons. The Ukrainians have no weapons. They're losing the war. There's consensus in the mainstream media. They're losing the war. And the Republicans now are vulnerable because they're losing the war because they have no weapons. And it's the Republicans holding on to the weapons about the border security, but Biden's willing to compromise on the border security. It's now a complicated issue. The same thing with Israel, because the Republicans could have probably ridden out the Ukrainian thing a little bit longer. Because frankly speaking, despite all the polls, nobody cares. Nobody cares about Ukraine. It's a little flag waving meme, but we really don't care. The nation that we do care about in America is Israel, because Israel has bought and paid for us. We have this wonderful relationship, basically client prostitute. And that's what it is, baby. It's political prostitution on a grand scale. And the Israelis have paid their money and they need to get the service that they paid for. And, so we're playing games. We had genocide taking place. It's difficult for the Israelis to overcome this genocide thing. Very difficult. But all of a sudden, Iran attacks Israel with massive missiles and drones, and the visuals of that for the Americans. The Americans don't care that Israel attacked the Iranian consulate. We don't care about international law. We never did. If we did care about international law, we wouldn't have invaded Iraq back in 2003. We don't care about international law. It's something we throw out there when it's convenient and we ignore when it's not convenient. And so when Iran bombed the consulate, we have idiots like, even though he's not American, he used to broadcast on CNN, Piers Morgan. It's not really diplomatically protected if they had military people inside that consulate planning operations against the Israelis. It's now a legitimate military target. Hey, Piers, you moron. Every American embassy and British embassy in the entire world, therefore, is a legitimate military target. Because that's what? We have a defense attaché office that hosts meetings there where they plan military operations against neighbors all the time. You literally just made the U.S. embassy and the British embassy in Kiev, Ukraine, a legitimate target because right now, as we speak, The British and Americans have delegations, intelligence and military, inside there working with Ukrainians to plan attacks against the Russians. So with your genius analysis, you just said it's okay for Russia to blow up the American embassy and the British embassy because they're doing things that could be deemed as hostile by Piers Morgan is a moron, but we've known that for some time now. So is almost everybody else in the mainstream media. The Americans don't understand how important it is to have diplomatic inviolability, protection, because once you lose that, every embassy becomes a target. And while they may be doing things inside that embassy, hint, hint, if there's a CIA station, they're doing things you don't want them to do. China knows this. I mean, China's a grown-up country. They know inside the American embassy in Beijing, the CIA is plotting to do horrible things to the Chinese. Espionage, bring the Uyghurs up, all this stuff. They don't bomb the U.S. embassy. They don't bomb it in neighboring countries where we work with people to go into China and do stuff. It's the real world. And China's doing the same thing to us. Okay, I'm not going to pretend that Chinese don't have an intelligence service. I'm not going to pretend that the intelligence service of China isn't actively conspiring against the United States. I don't think they do the military thing where they're trying to foment unrest and revolution, but they're spying. Of course they are. That's the second oldest profession. The first oldest is prostitution, the American-Israeli relationship. But the point is that America didn't pick up on the niceties. We don't understand the complexity. All we know is Iran attacked Israel, and it was very expensive, and it was overwhelming, and Israel's screaming bloody murder, and suddenly we're holding on to the aid that Israel says it needs. And it became politically impossible for the Republicans to continue to run this border security scam that they were working on the American. I'm not saying it's a scam, meaning it's a serious issue, but the Republicans don't care about border security, just like anything else. They were using it for political purposes. They were happy all these immigrants are coming over because it makes Biden look weak. Let it happen. Bring it on. Make Biden look even more weak. Bust these people off. Destroy the economies of New York City and Boston and all these other liberal bastions. This is a game, political game that's being played. There's no serious people on either party. They're just playing stupid games where human lives are at risk. And what happened here is that the Republicans, and look who called the shot. Mike Johnson went down to Mar-a-Lago and met with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, the Godfather, Mike Johnson kissed the ring. And the Godfather said, you can release the funds. You can release the funds at a time and place of my choosing. I will tell you to call the funds up again, but now you can release them. So Mike Johnson came back, magically overnight, released the funds. He did a little game, broke it up into pockets, voted on. Now he's going to put it back together, send it to the Senate. There isn't a snowball's chance in hell that the Senate's going to mess this thing up. All right, they've been handed a gift, and they're gonna whatever stupid TikTok things and all that. We'll get to TikTok later. That's Carl's thing, not mine. Whatever games they're playing there, the Senate's going to just go right through that. I think they're going to wrap this thing up, put it on Biden's desk, and Biden's going to sign off on it because this is a Democrat victory. The Democrats outlasted, basically the Republicans have punted on border security, and it's not going to be the issue they were hoping for it to be going into the summer because they blew it. They just lost all their leverage on border security now. Now it's going to come down to a debate on the details, and the Republicans don't win on the details and all that. So this is all about domestic American politics. Will the money going to Israel help Israel? Not at all. Israel has dug itself into a hole it can't get out. The genocide isn't going away. Excuse me. As we speak, the Biden administration is getting ready to do an unprecedented sanctioning of an Israeli Defense Force unit. I've spoken about these guys before. These ultra-Orthodox guys who go into the yeshivas, who study the Talmud for 5 years. They form reserve battalions, and they've been going into Gaza doing the, Amalek annihilation. The seed of Amalek must be eliminated. These guys are committing mass murder. They're doing horrible things. It's not just one battalion. There's many of them. It's the whole Israeli army going in there. They're finding mass graves right now where bodies, were executed, patients, doctors. taken out shot. This is a nightmare for Israel, and genocide's not going away, so that problem's still there. The money isn't going to solve that. The money that we're giving Israel isn't going to solve the fact that they don't have a tactical solution to Hamas. It isn't going to solve the problem of Hezbollah, and it isn't going to make Iran go away. So the money doesn't solve anything about Israel's real national security problems. It solves a domestic political problem for the Republicans, because now they can say, we got the money to Israel. We're going to take credit for that in the short term. The same thing with Ukraine. I mean, it's 60 billion, but it's not 60 billion. A good portion of that just comes right back in the United States. Ukraine will never see it. The other stuff is broken up in different packages. Around 20 billion that's going to come into Ukraine in terms of real military aid, broken up over time, but it's not going to change anything. We gave them 22 billion to launch a counteroffensive, and they all died. And we're going to give them 20 billion now. But remember, the situation that existed when we gave them 23 billion for the counteroffensive, they had a much better situation. If they had a viable air defense shield, they had significant, infrastructure in place. They hadn't burned through all their reserves yet. They were still a credible military. Now we're getting them 20 billion, but there's nothing left. They've got nothing. No air defense, no infrastructure, no manpower. I mean, what are you going to do? Throw money at the Russians? Hey, come here, Russians. Hit them with you hit them with that one of those thickly stacked $100 bill things. You could hurt somebody. I mean, hurt me. Oh, damn, hit me again. Oh, damn, hit me again. But that's about it. You got to turn those into weapons, and those weapons have to make it to the battlefield, but it's a completely different situation. The most important thing for Ukraine is manpower right now. They don't have any. They can't recruit it. They did a new law, mobilization law, which does away with conscription, and now talks about mandatory, train. Looks great on paper. And if they had 3 to 5 years to implement this thing, it would be a solid law. They need 250,000 troops right now on the front. They don't have them. If they go around in Shanghai, everybody, they still have to train them. Then you have to equip them, and then you have to get them to the front. This isn't a static situation on the front line right now. The Russians are pressing forward everywhere. There's no relenting. As the weather gets better, the Russians are going to press forward even harder. There's no air defense, so the Russians have projected power forward. You try and bring this stuff into Ukraine, bam, 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 it's going to get hit. This isn't going to be an easy transition into money, military power, hurt the Russians. Will the Russians get hit by ATACMS? Of course they will. Will ATACMS change the scenario? Absolutely not. It's not a magic weapon. All this does is allow the Republicans to, Jason Crow, if you're listening to me, Representative Crow, I can't say what I want to say, but you waving that Ukrainian flag was perhaps the most embarrassing moment of your pathetic political life. All right. You literally are celebrating the deaths. And this is the sad reality here. Between 100 and 200,000 Ukrainians are going to die because of this bill. It isn't going to change the outcome of this war. It isn't even going to change the timing of this significantly. They might have bought the Ukrainians another 10 to 20 days. But the bottom line is Russia has a plan. If you think for a second that the Russians didn't sit there and say, what happens if they get $20 billion? I love the Ukrainians. The Russians are in a panic. Yeah, they look like they're panicking. Have you heard the Russians come out and say anything? Why? Because they're letting the results do the talking. They're just going to keep doing what they do. This doesn't change anything. They might have to alter some of their targeting, their intelligence, to try and interdict this stuff as it comes in. But other than that, it isn't going to change anything. So this is about domestic American politics. This is about the Republicans having to yield to the insufficiency of their master plan about border security. They've lost the border security issue. They're trying to get temporary feel-good moments out of getting this money sent out. It'll have no impact on Israel, none. You can't reverse the genocide trend. It will have no impact on Ukraine, none, because Russia is in a dominant position that they're not going to yield. And I think I'll leave China as a separate, because I have some ideas on China, but I'd like to hear Carl's thoughts before I go in, because he's the expert. I'm not. But that's where we stand on this money. It's a huge issue here in America, but we've been scammed. We've been scammed by the media. We've been scammed by the Republicans. We've been scammed by the Democrats. We've been scammed by everybody. But it's about domestic American politics, positioning for the coming really silly seasons of the summer before November, where facts don't matter. It's just purely the fiction that these politicized news hounds put out there. And that's all this is. This will burn out. you just trust me, there's not going to be a Ukrainian victory. There's not going to be any. This money is going. It's going to be slow rolled into Ukraine. People are going to die. It's going to have zero impact on Israel. No one's going to be talking about this money. It's a drop in the bucket. We were sending them money anyways. Everybody's going to be talking about genocide. I mean, the big news right now is when Blinken announces sanctions against an Israeli Defense Force unit. In the controversy, you're going to hear scream about it. No one will ever talk about the Israeli money ever again. They'll be talking about genocide. On Ukraine, trust me, in a week, they'll be talking about why the city of Chasiv Yar fell, why other cities falling, why the Russians are still advancing. Is there any chance? Where are the Ukrainian troops? It's a meaningless action. It was all done for domestic political politics.
Why did they bundle everything? Why did they bundle Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan all together? Is that just like how they do budget, or is this actually like some kind of marketing thing that they try to push the bill together with?
Well, it's a supplemental defense spending act, so all of it has to be put together again by the Biden administration when they submit it. What the Republicans did is they took that and they linked it to border security, holding it hostage, saying that we won't vote on this money until you give us money. If you're going to give money to Ukraine for defense, if you're going to give money to Israel for defense, if you're giving money to Taiwan for defense, we need money for border security because we have a war here. They're coming over the border, coming over the wire. It's zombie day. We got to defend ourselves. We need money. So they held it hostage, thinking that if the Biden administration yielded and said, here's your money, that's the Biden administration admitting we got it wrong on the border. You guys are right. You're superior to us. Moving into a presidential election, that's not a good image. So what the Biden administration says, we're willing to work with you here, but we're not fundamentally wrong, and we're not going to yield to this pressure. And so the Biden administration then threw the blame for the lack of Ukraine aid, Israel aid, China aid onto the Republicans. But as long as the Republicans were able to keep border security front and center, nobody, they weren't paying a political price. But the combination of how the Biden administration worked with the media that changed the narrative about Ukraine. Look, the narrative changed on three things. On Ukraine, they're getting beat for the first time. Remember, they were always, the Ukrainians are winning. They're going to win. The Russians are losing. The Russians can't win. Suddenly the Russians are winning. The Ukrainians can't win. Why? They need weapons. They need weapons. They need weapons. They need weapons. That became the thematic. And then everybody was talking about how they're losing, but if we just gave them weapons, shot them up with that magic weapon heroin, they'd all get going and be able to run forward. And then on Israel, that was an impossible one to get the American people excited about because of this genocide thing. But the Iranian attack changed everything, a whole new dynamic. And so that happened. And then on Taiwan, basically the argument on Taiwan was if we let the Russians win, we're empowering the Chinese to do the same thing against Taiwan. So if you want to save Taiwan, we have to defeat the Russians. Or to defeat the Russians, we need the weapons. And so they wrapped all these things together, threw it back at the Republicans who couldn't hold the border security narrative together. They're saying, well, it's very important. We're going to impeach Mayorkas. No, you're not. Went to the Senate, and the Senate went, get out of here. Well, it's the most dangerous thing in the world. But Americans are going, there's only so many images of immigrants coming over the fence that you can see. Then it gets complicated because people start to dig deeper and they say, well, wait a minute, if the Republicans would just reach this compromise with Biden, maybe we could improve this security. It becomes a complicated issue. And the Republicans found that people were starting to talk more about the fact that the Republicans were holding up the money to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, and less about Biden not doing the right thing at the border. The script had been flipped, and now the Republicans had to punt on the issue.
So why did they? Okay, so that happened, but you said something interesting. You said most of the money will actually never reach Ukraine. Will never end up in the hands of Ukrainian. They will just get cycled back to United States. Are you talking about? Is it because most of the money are going toward weapon purchases? That's just going to the U.S. military-industrial complex.
Yeah, we. In previous, aid to the Ukrainians, there's different ways that we give the Ukrainians. We can buy new weapons, or we can draw down our stockpiles and give those to Ukrainians. We've done both. We don't have any new weapons to buy, or we don't have the money to do that. And when we've drawn down to very dangerous levels. Again, just if we want to go to war against China, we need to have equipment, weapons, stuff. If we want to fight the Russians in Europe, we need to have equipment, weapons, stuff. Oh my God, if we ever had to go to war against Iran, we need to have equipment, weapons, stuff. And a lot of that's in storage, in reserve, waiting. And what we did is we said, okay, we're going to start handing that stuff out to the Ukrainians. And finally, the military went, whoa, we're getting very dangerously low on the stockpiles of weapons we will need if we have to fight any of these other things. So they stopped. So what's happening now is we need the money to rebuild that. We gave that money away. We need the money to rebuild that. And so we allocate it. It's basically what we're doing is I mean, we're going to replace the goods, but it's sort of the Ukraine's got the raw end of the deal because you got the old stuff. Let me tell you how it works, Ukraine, just so you guys understand. We don't like you. I just want to reiterate that. We really don't like you because we don't give you the good stuff. It's like, me going and saying, I'm hungry. And someone says, Scott, I'm going to give you some delicious baked beans. You guys are the nicest people. I love baked beans. But they go to the back of the warehouse where they pull the can out and they go, expiration date, 1988. Yeah, we'll give Scott the 1988 expired baked beans. And I'm going, but guys, half of this stuff's rancid. If I eat it, I get food poisoning. But you said you wanted baked beans, boy. Here you go, 1988. We reach in the back and we give the Ukrainians all the expired javelins, all the expired artillery, all the crap. And it gets there, and some of this stuff doesn't work. I mean, I feel, again, I don't have too much sympathy for the Ukrainians, but I got a feel for a guy who's been given a weapon and expects it to work and pops up and goes, and it doesn't work. And now he's just exposed himself in a life and death situation under the anticipation that this weapon's going to work. And now he's going to die because we gave him bad stuff. I mean, that's pretty crappy of us, but we are a crappy nation. We're not friends. Again, for all the Ukrainians watching, we don't like you. We don't, never have, never will. To the last Ukrainian is exactly what our policy is. Lindsey Graham, for once in his pathetic life, has been honest. And we will fight this to the last Ukrainian. We want you all to die. We don't care about you. Just all we ask is that before you die, you kill as many Russians as possible. We're going to give you these weapons. You're going to die, but just kill a bunch of Russians first, and then we're happy. And they've admitted this. How many times do I have to hear an American representative in Congress say, this is the best deal in the world? For a fraction of our defense budget, we're able to transfer lethal capability to the Ukrainians so they can kill Russians, and it doesn't cost us any manpower. That is the ultimate expression of moral depravity. But the Americans are saying this with pride, and the American people are letting them get away with it. That's what I don't understand. Why are we sitting there going, guys, that's perverse. That's sick. What kind of friend does that? How can you wave a Ukrainian flag claiming to be their friend when you literally just sentenced 200,000 Ukrainian men to death? This is just mind-boggling to me. Thank God for the Russians. I mean, I don't know. You heard that expression, take a chill pill? We use that a lot in America. I know my kids have used it with me. Dad, take a chill pill, especially when they watch me do podcasts like this. They're like, take a chill pill, calm down. The Russians have invented chill pill. I mean, Putin, he takes a chill pill every morning. Lavrov takes a chill pill. Shoigu. The Russians, you don't see them getting excited. The Russians are just like, okay, I understand. And we're just going to keep doing what we do.
I got a question, Scott. I mean, we talked about the money that's going in there. We talked about the billions and billions and billions going to what I used to use the term MIC for made in China, and now I call it military industrial complex. Now it used to be made in China, but now brand MIC is the military industrial complex. What does, let's say, 20 billion buy you if you're Alinsky and company? Does that buy you to November's election, or are we going to have a double Afghanistan issue here, where it's just going to be a massive embarrassment for the political elections here in November? I mean, my concern is that maybe they've undershot. Maybe they should have went for 100 billion if they wanted to, save face. I mean, are we going to see, Russia maybe understand that November is a deadline that could work in their favor if they go on the offensive here in the next little while?
Well, first of all, let me just start off by saying Russia doesn't understand calendars. Not in this war. They don't care. We all care about calendars. I mean, it's amazing how much we care about calendars, because we need the Russians to win this war when it's convenient for me. I'm going to Russia in June. I need the Russians to do something dramatic so that when I go to Russia in June, I have something to talk about that it increase my vibe. And the Russians go, yes, Scott, we'll do that, pal. We'll kill 40,000 Russian soldiers to accelerate our offensive operation just so you get to be convenienced. The Russians don't care about the calendar. They gave up the calendar a long time ago. They care about objectives, and they will adjust. They're right now doing a $20 billion adjustment going, what does that mean? And I believe the real answer is not much. I mean, it's like me having a sports car and hearing a little hiccup, and I open up the engine and I go, all I have to do is adjust that gap in my spark plug. I'm giving away my age because I don't even know if spark plugs have gaps anymore. I don't even know if they use spark plugs anymore. But I just know when I was a kid in Boy Scouts, I had to do my automotive merit badge, and my dad had to take me in and teach me how to do timing in a spark plug gap. And you had this little tool that you went in, you cleaned the carbon off and made sure the gap was right and all that. But the bottom line is you did that, you shut the engine, worked. You didn't have to do anything else. No carburetor change, no nothing. Things working. All this 20 billion did is a little hiccup in spark plug gap, and the Russians will go in and fix that, and the engine's going to work. This is nothing. This is a big nothing burger. What does it buy the Ukrainians? First of all, remember, Ukraine is in a horrible situation right now. A lot of the money that we're giving to the Ukrainians is for training and intelligence support and stuff like that. But they need literally 150,000 troops right now on the front line. They don't have them. They're having trouble recruiting them. But let's say they had them. You have to train them. The bare minimum training you need to be just functional on the battlefield is 3 months. Now, you can't train them in Ukraine because there's no air defense. So you bring them all together, the train facility, and boom, boom, boom. Mr. Kinzhal comes out, Mr. Iskander comes out, and it's very difficult to train when you're being blown up by Russian missiles. Training, you need to get good 8 hours sleep every night. You need to eat. You got to get physically fit. And then you have to go out and do this stuff and then come back in classrooms. And, it's 3 months of focused training to turn a raw recruit into somebody that can function on the battlefield. So it's going to have to happen outside of Ukraine, not inside Ukraine. That's logistics. But now imagine you thump somebody over the head, because that's the Ukrainian recruitment method, over the head in a van, and you're going to send him to Poland? So he gets off in Poland and he turns to the Polish instructors and said, I don't want to be here. I got thumped on the head. I'm declaring myself to be a refugee. The Poles will go, well, you can't. You're here under a military contract. Okay, but now this guy, do you think he's going to sit there? You're right, guys. I'm going to sit in class and just listen. And I'm going to obey. I'm going to become the best soldier in the world, even though I don't want. No, that's going to be the most disruptive soldier. My point is, you can't train somebody who doesn't want to be there. And so how do you train these people? No amount of money is going to solve this problem. The fact that nobody believes in the war anymore. And the Ukrainians are having a huge recruiting problem. But let's just say, hypothetically, you did that. So you train them up. Some of this 20 billion is going to go to equipping them. So now you bring in all that equipment. Now, are you going to, you're going to give them their uniforms and their guns and everything at the basic training. But what about the tanks and everything they're going to need? The artillery, the armored vehicle, they're going to fall in on this there, or are you going to ship that off to Ukraine and they're going to fall in? Either way, you got a problem, because you got a footprint of logistics that has to move with these people. And the Russians are sitting there with their satellites and their other capabilities going, we got them. And as they come in, see, there used to be umbrellas of Patriot air defense and NASAMS and all this stuff that complicated the Russian effort. So the Russians were trying to interdict this stuff, but they broke it up into 12 penny packets. The Russians could only interdict 5. 7 get to the front lines. That's, and we built that in as we designed this thing. We said we expect the Russians to interdict so many percentages, so we're going to break it up into penny packets that can come in, be combined to have a combat effectiveness. We'll overload the system up front to get what we need, when the time for the battlefield. But that's assuming that all this protection exists. It's not there anymore. So as we break things up, what we're finding out is we send it in, bam, it's hit. Send it in, bam, it's hit. Let's break it up even smaller. Break it up, bam, it's hit, bam, it's hit, bam, it's hit, bam. The Russians are interdicting a whole lot more of this. So as they move it to the front line where it needs to be, it's already getting dissipated. By the time it gets to the front line, the Ukrainians have now found out that they can't gather everything together because the Russians hit it as well. There's no air defense. Well, Scott, isn't some of this Patriots? Some of it is. Where do you think the priority of Patriot coverage are going to go? Front line? No, they tried that. They tried the mobile Patriot packet where they put them in and the Russians killed all the Patriots. And suddenly the Ukrainians went, damn, we don't have any more Patriots left because our experiment failed. They're going to put it in Kiev to protect the capital. They're going to put it around airfields to protect F-16s when they come in. They're going to take it down and try and protect Odessa because that's our launching pad for strikes against Crimea. Okay, so you have that. But remember, they're trying to install it in Kiev, the airfields in Odessa, without existing air defense. So as they bring it in, the Russians will go, yeah, gotcha. And there's not enough air defense. I mean, this isn't even a case of, have two to get one. You're going to need to have 3 or 4. So you're going to need 3 or 4 Patriot batteries ready to deploy to get one ready to operate. And then when that one's operating, the Russians still have shown that they know how to kill it. So the Russians will simply overwhelm the air defense yet again. There's a reason why there's no air defense in Ukraine. It's because the Russians killed it all. And the Russians have a tactic that causes Ukrainians to expend all of their missiles. So what? We're going to give them new batteries and new missiles. And you're telling me the Russians can't repeat the tactic that worked last time, but this time the Ukrainians are even weaker now as they try to prepare to counter the Russian tactics? Ukraine has no chance. There's no chance whatsoever. That's the reality of it. That's why this bill is a crime. And it doesn't matter, to be frank, how much money they poured into this. You could have doubled, tripled the amount of money you want to give Ukraine. All you did is make the Russian targeting problem a little bit more severe, but the Russians have the ability to target this. The Ukrainians can't stabilize the situation and then flip the script on the Russians. The situation will never be stabilized. The Russians will always maintain the momentum. And this war is over. It didn't solve anything. The Russians have said that they expect dramatic results on the battlefield by May, or a month out. And we're starting to see the fractures in the battlefield. And the Ukrainians don't have troops to plug it up. Even if this stuff comes in, the Ukrainians said it ain't going to get there for a couple of weeks, if not months. That means that the Russians, again, have carte blanche for that period of time to continue doing what they're doing. We get into May. What are the dramatic results? Probably a rupturing of the front lines, a move on the Dnieper. The Ukrainians have to make a precipitous retreat. Dramatic. Now, one thing that they did do, though, is give the Zelensky government the ability to pay off pensions and pay salaries. This creates sort of a political stability, which is to the benefit of Zelensky. So if the Russians are going to put the full press on the Ukrainians to get rid of Zelensky, there's a big thing coming up in May 20th. I think that's when the Russians are going to say that Zelensky is no longer the president of Ukraine because he didn't have an election, and that's when his term expires. And they'll say after that he's constitutionally not the. And then a lot of options open up then, because if he's not the president, is he protected? Can the Russians take him out? Who are the Russians going to negotiate with? The Russians can deny. My point is, this money might have bought Zelensky a little bit more time of viability, but they bleed through that money that quick. Plus, it's corrupt. You really think that all the money that was going to go to the pensioners is going to the pensioners, or is it going to go to Zelensky's retirement fund in Miami and fund a whole bunch of other people retiring? Because the panic's on right now in Ukraine, and now this money came in, and they're going, "Thank you, you guys bought us our ticket out of here." And the corruption is unreal. The political collapse of Ukraine might have been staved off a little bit, but I still think you're looking by the end of this summer. There's just no way that Zelensky can stay in. And here's the big question: when they burn through this money, and they will burn through this money very quickly, is the United States ready to do this all over again? Do you remember, if you think about the political climate of trying to get $60 billion pushed through, imagine having just done this And then now come up in August, right before the election season, and the Ukrainians go, "We need more, baby. We need more. Mama needs a new pair of shoes. You got to feed the baby." And the American people are going to go, "What? We just gave you all this money. You want more? Welcome to the bottomless pit, the money pit called Ukraine." And so this is a disaster for Ukraine. There's no calendar that's going to save them.
Yeah, I was reading earlier this week, if you took all the funding from the European Union, Collective West, the United States, everybody out of the Ukraine economy, it would be approximately doing 16% of what it used to do before the conflict started. So, in fact, their GDP is 84% fiction, if you can even call it a GDP. I got an interesting scenario, and I want both you guys to think about this for a moment here. When Russia, takes territory and it advances, it takes these small towns or even small little cities in Ukraine. And I asked Patrick Lancaster this question the other day. Think about it for a moment, Carl and Scott. If there is a major push forward and Russia starts to take territories by, I guess, the kilometers over a few weeks period, what happens to the communication lines? For example, one person could wake up and the next morning they wake up, Russia could have taken that territory, and now the cellular phone networks and internet networks and water and electricity would instantly be shut off by Ukraine. Is that a possibility that Russia can take territory and then turn those services back on? I know it's a bizarre question, but I would like to get an answer on how this shift of territory losses goes. And let's say it goes in the favor of Russia. If they advance 5 kilometers or 6 kilometers over a couple of weeks period, or maybe a week's period, what happens to all that infrastructure and who controls it after? And to me, is it just scorched earth, dead earth, because they've been fighting? It's an interesting question. It's been boggling my mind, and I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on it.
Well, we know the answer. It's not a hypothetical. It's a real thing. First of all, most of the fighting that's taking place is on Russian territory. Now, the Ukrainians dispute that, but fighting in Kherson, fighting in Zaporizhia, fighting in Donetsk, even some fighting in Lugansk. These are the Russians fighting to evict Ukrainians from what the Russians believe is legally Russian territory. So the Russians have a plan. That village that the Ukrainians are occupying is a Russian village. And the Russians haven't written that village off. In fact, the Russians have a plan that when they take over that village, they already have a plan, and they have money budgeted how to extend gas lines in, how to extend services in, how do we make life livable again? Once it's been demined, once it's been deemed safe, once you push the Ukrainians back, how to repopulate this and make this a viable city. The Russians have a plan. The Russians aren't writing off Russian territory. All of Zaporizhia, all of Kherson, all of Donetsk will become part of Russia and will be absorbed into Russia and brought up to the standards of living that Russia enjoys, which is a good standard of living, by the way. So they already have a plan. We see that in Bakhmut. We see that in Avdiivka, that already the Russians have come in, start the process rebuilding. Mariupol stands as a shining example of how Russia takes responsibility for reconstruction. Now, but we also know, for instance, when the Russians moved into Kherson and Zaporizhia before it was Russia, back when it was occupied Ukraine, before the Russians had done the referendum, while the Russian government was actively negotiating with Ukrainians for the return of Kherson and Zaporizhia as part of a settlement, even then, because the Russians are actually not bad people. And so they came in and they took responsibility for the territory. They said, we occupied this place. If the Ukrainians turn off the lights, we have to turn on the lights. If the Ukrainians turn off the gas, we have to turn on the gas. We come in, we pave the roads. Education. I mean, the Russians went in and said, well, we're now occupying the Kharkov district, and we've got a whole bunch of civilians here who have kids who need to go to school. And so, they're now in the Russian school system. they took the teachers off for a training session on how to, teach the Russian curriculum, brought the teachers back. They started the school. Then the Ukrainians counterattacked, captured this thing, took every single one of these teachers that went off and got a Russian education and executed them. That's the Ukrainians. These are the scum of the earth. But the Russians were sitting there saying, we got to have the schools open up. The schools have to operate under the Russian system because that's what it is. And they were trying to do the right thing. The Russians have a plan for everything. And if the Russians take territory, they own that territory, at least in terms of responsibility. What Russia will give back to a post-war conflict Ukraine, I don't know. That has yet to be determined. But what we can say for certain is that Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk will be Russia in totality, just like Crimea is, and that the Russians, look at Crimea. The Russians, took over Crimea in 2014. Crimea was run down after, 24 years of Ukrainian misrule. 24 years. The Russians have been working to rebuild it ever since, get everything up to speed. There was a little village of Batelny where a good friend of mine, Alexander Ziryanov, my host when I go to Russia, that's where he was born and raised. And his next door neighbors were a Crimean Tatar family. And when I first visited them in May of last year, they were like, all this wonderful construction. They have the great highway being built that connects the Crimea Bridge with Sevastopol and all this right there on the horizon, modern construction. They're like, well, it's nice to see all this Russian construction taking place and all this stuff happening, but the villages are sort of getting the short shrift. We're not getting any of that rehabilitation money. And they had problems. They didn't have gas. They had to use electricity, which is very expensive compared to gas. They didn't have sewage lines, even though a water line was right there. They had to get their own water. But when I went back in January and visited Fatima's family, the Crimean Tatar family, the gas lines were up. The Russians had come in and started laying out the gas lines. Right now, I'm pretty sure that they're all connected to gas, and they're also talking about bringing sewage in. It takes time. After 24 years of misrule, it takes time. Russia's at war with Ukraine. You'd think their number one priority is to produce weapons and all this stuff. But while that's all happening, the Russians are still spending money to improve the infrastructure, the life of the people of Russia. It wasn't about bringing Batelny up to where it was under the Ukrainians. That's not the Russian standard. It's not to say, let's get you to where the Ukrainians had you. It's let's get you to where Russians should be. And when I say Russians should be, understand I'm talking about a Crimean Tatar family, whom, if you listen to Ukrainians, are the most oppressed people on the planet. But here you are in Crimea, a Crimean Tatar village is being brought the gas, being brought the the various utilities that modern life requires. And I guarantee if I go back there in a year and a half, the roads will be paved. They've already rebuilt the schools. They've rebuilt building. Everything that crumbled under the Ukrainians is being rebuilt while Russia's at war. Now you know what Russia's going to do when they capture villages and towns in Ukraine. Once the fighting is pushed away, Russia will invest the necessary resources needed to get these places up so that they're livable. And if they're going to be part of Russia, to bring them up to Russian standards, full Russian standards, which, contrary to what the Western media says, are actually pretty good living standards.
So why is Ukrainian political class, the political elite, are not working toward a peace settlement? I mean, we know Boris Johnson put a stop to the Istanbul negotiations when, at that time, back in March 2022, Ukraine was already ready to sit down with Russians to work out a deal. But Boris Johnson came in and said, don't call it off. We'll support you 100%. What Zelensky is hoping to get out of this by prolonging the conflict? I mean, wouldn't the Ukrainian political establishment, couldn't they see that there's no future in continuing this conflict for the Ukrainian nation? I mean, why wouldn't they just say, okay, well, like, this is hopeless. We'll just come to a peace settlement with Russia right now, on even on Russia's terms?
Well, I mean, the working assumption in what you just said is that the Ukrainian political establishment cares about the Ukrainian nation, and they don't. They care about themselves. There's a reason why we call Ukraine the most corrupt nation in Europe, because it is the most corrupt nation in Europe. And the oligarch class, which funded the political class, it's interesting. I don't know how many people have seen it. And for all the people out there tuning in, take the time, because it's actually a very interesting program, A Servant of the People. It was Zelensky's TV series that helped propel him to become president of Ukraine. And when you look at the first part of the series, you see these oligarchs, these old fat men meeting in a banya, plotting the how they're going to control Ukraine, who they're going to bring in, how they're going to do this, that, and the other thing. That's the reality of Ukraine. It's not about the will of the people or anything. It's about oligarchs controlling the environment so they make money. It's one giant grift. Ukraine has been one giant grift from the moment of its independence of the Soviet Union up until today. It's been, Burisma, this energy holding company, is just a money laundering facility. And we talk about the Bidens, but we should talk about everybody else that goes through there. I'm not going to dox the poor woman, but there's a former, Assistant Secretary of Defense who speaks often about this, but she needs to explain the fact that there's a photograph of her at a, in Ukraine wearing a Burisma jacket. It's like, really? Burisma's bought everybody. It's a vehicle for funding campaigns. It's a vehicle for funding covert intelligence. It's just this giant money laundering operation that Biden happened to latch into by putting Hunter Biden there, and then 10% to the big man and the whole thing. But the point is, Ukraine is just corrupt. So you can't sit there and say there's a political class that cares about the Ukrainian people. The political class that cared about at least part of the Ukrainian people were the pro-Russian parties that were thrown out after the Maidan coup of 2014. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that there was no corruption. First of all, if you're a politician, whether you're a Russian, Ukrainian politician in Ukraine, you can't be a politician unless you somewhat play the game. And so even if you're playing the game just to survive, you're still, plugged in doing stuff. But there's really bad people and there's good. And if you take a look at the Russian politicians, they were actually trying to play the game to improve the lot of the Russian people in Ukraine. At least their motives were pure in whatever corruption they were involved in. But for the Ukrainian power elite, no, this is just about how to make money, how to grift. They've never cared about the Ukrainian people from day one. If they did care, they wouldn't have. But Zelensky, remember, he ran on a platform where he said, I will crawl on my knees to Putin and beg him not to go to war with Ukraine. Why didn't you? Well, because that wasn't his job. His job was to say that to get elected. Then once he got elected, his job was to do exactly what he's doing right now. A lot of people don't realize, they talk, you hear all these people talk about the European Union. In 2013, Poroshenko, the Ukrainian president, said that Viktor Yanukovych, the Ukrainian president, said that he wanted to join the European Union. And the Russians said, yes, we will allow you to. But the Russians never really meant that. No, Russia did. Ukraine's a sovereign state. And Russia's like, you want to join the European Union? We can't stop you. You're a sovereign state. But here's the problem, Ukraine. Since 1991, when you became an independent state, we've had this wonderful economic relationship with you that's sort of underwritten your economy. And we have this free energy deal where we pay you a lot of money because pipelines send energy to Europe. And so, now you've suddenly inherited a multi-billion-dollar grift. And the Ukrainians are like, money, 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 money. That's how they create Burisma and other things to launder this money. And the Russians are like, and we give you a good deal. You can take your goods and bring them into Russia tax-free, duty-free. We got this wonderful economic relationship going on here. You want to join the European Union, all of that shuts down. We have to treat you now as we would any member of Europe, which means there's going to be tariffs, there's going to be structure, things are going to happen. And Yanukovych went, but my economy will collapse. And the Russians are like, hey, free will, Bubby. You want to join EU? You work it out with the EU. If your economy is going to collapse, put a number on it, give it to the EU and say, if you want us to join, you have to pay us this much money to compensate for the losses. And the European Union went, we ain't doing that, because the European Union, never wanted Ukraine to be a real member. All the European Union wanted is Ukraine to become a market for European Union goods, to do what they always do, lure people in with the promise of membership, knowing they don't qualify, knowing they never will qualify, but knowing they have a market there for European Union goods. So you, like any good colonial power, you now create a master-servant relationship with Ukraine. That's all the EU wanted. And for all the Georgians out there who are out there demonstrating against the Foreign Agent Registration Act, that's all the EU wants with you too. They want you to be a market for the EU. They don't want you to be a member. You'll never be a member. You don't qualify. You never will qualify. The Russians, however, have a nice little economic relationship with you that they could expand on and sustain, but you don't want it because you want the cocaine offered by the European Union. Well, Ukraine got hooked on that cocaine, and look where it has them right now. So no, this notion of Ukraine being this viable economy, the Ukrainian politicians caring for the Ukrainian people, they never have. It's just been one giant grift. And so the people in power right now aren't looking at this. This is a sad thing. They're willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands more Ukrainian lives for short-term financial gain, because in the end, they'll all flee. They have already bought their homes in Miami. They've already bought their homes in France, in London. They've stashed their money in bank accounts. Life will be good for them and their kids. Their kids aren't fighting on the front line. Their kids are out partying in Dubai and partying in Paris and partying in London and partying in Miami, partying in New York. So let's not pretend for a moment that there's a political class in Ukraine that gives one damn about the Ukrainian people. They don't at all.
I'm going to bring up this story here. Well, we got you on this, everybody on the screen here, where Scott was talking about money laundering and lots of cash going places. I don't know if you viewers know that I lived in Monaco for about 20 years. It is a tax haven in the south of France that has a population of about 35,000 people. Only 6,000 are original Monegasque residents, and the other 29 to 30,000 are permanent residents with residence cards. How you get a residence card in Monaco is very simple. It doesn't go through an immigration policy. It goes through a bank. A bank will write your attestation, which will give you the right to abode or right to live in Monaco. And usually back when I was about 20 years ago, anywhere from 1 million to 5 million would get you that signature. We fast forward to 2024. Latest buddies I've been talking to there, it's between 5 to 10 million. Now, if you watch this story here, it's very clear. Ukrainian oligarchs' secret escape to the French Riviera. And since the invasion of their country, dozens of wealthy Ukrainian families have fled to villas in the south of France. And I'll tell you why it's villas in the south of France first. And then it says these illegal departures of men for fighting age have earned them nicknamed the Monaco Battalion. Now, it's interesting how they've made it sound like these are victims. First of all, the game in town, if you live in Monaco, is to own an apartment, which should set you back anywhere from 3 to 5 million for a studio. Once you've purchased that studio, then you usually buy a villa in the hills, probably 5 to 10 minutes outside of Monaco, and that should set you back probably about 10 to 15 million dollars as well. What is interesting is most of these homes that were owned by Russians were seized by the French government, and some of them were put on the auction block. And, well, lo and behold, they were purchased by offshore companies that were either in Belize or the Cayman Islands or the Turks and Caicos, and then money wired through there and back around. So my whole point of this is if you want to see in broad daylight where the U.S. tax dollars are going, all you have to do is get a plane ticket to the south of France, a quick ride from the Nice airport into Monaco. You will see the blue and yellow license plates on the Ferraris, the Bentleys, and there is not one care in the world. They don't give a damn. Now, who exposed this was a reporter in Ukraine. He actually mentioned this to the authorities that this was going on. And after that was mentioned, 2 months, the reporter was actually arrested. Go figure on that one. You guys can take over from here. I want to switch gears here, Scott, if you don't mind, and let's get Carl's take on this thing that was added to this bill here on the weekend, where they said, okay, 95 billion approved. Now, here's what they were calling the Chinese. The House Leader, Mike Johnson, says that China, Iran, and Russia are global threats around the world and a threat to our prosperity and security. Their advance threatens the free world, and it demands Americans' leadership. On top of that, they've asked for the banning. Sorry, they've told the owners of TikTok, they didn't ask, they told them, sell this company to America. Now, there's 124 Fortune 500 U.S. companies in China right now. Carl, give us your where is this going? Is the Americans actually going to get this company sold right in front of broad daylight? I mean, if that happens, forget even opening any company in the United States. It's got to be bad for business. I want your take on this.
Oh, I mean, this is extortion, right? I mean, this the process of getting ByteDance to sell TikTok to American investors that started under the Trump administration. It continued under Biden, and the push behind that, there's a couple factors. There's the national security people who claim that TikTok is a tool for Chinese surveillance spying. But there's also a big business interest like Facebook and Google. They are getting their lunch eaten away by TikTok. You know, compared to TikTok, Instagram is nothing. Google, like the YouTube is trying to do like the short video format. They're trying to copy TikTok, but they're not achieving the same level of success. This is because ByteDance has this very good algorithm, the AI recommendation engine. And so what these people are trying to do, they're trying to get ByteDance to sell the algorithm to American companies. I mean, that's like the trade secret of ByteDance. The algorithm is the key. This is Chinese government has made it very clear they will not allow ByteDance to sell TikTok. You know, they rather TikTok get banned inside United States than having ByteDance forced to sell TikTok. So what does a TikTok ban even mean? You know, like, does it mean they're gonna just ban it from the IP address inside US? Or are they gonna try to ban it from all American platform, like I'm talking about iPhone and Android? Are they going to ban from the Apple Play Store and Google Play Store? Then that could actually amount to like a global ban. I mean, it will affect to all the users beyond the border of the U.S. And TikTok, I foresee if it goes to that far, ByteDance will probably take them to court. I mean, this is they can fight them under the freedom of speech issue. So this is political theater. You know, TikTok is a political theater. It's pushed by some very strong business group like Facebook and Google. They don't have any exposure in China, so for them, banning TikTok is only gain for them. They have they don't have to worry about losing the Chinese market because they're not in the Chinese market. Of course, this is not the case for other American companies. You know, the whole reason Tesla achieved its success right now is because they opened up the Shanghai Gigafactory. The Shanghai Gigafactory was a turning point for Tesla. And, you know, same thing with GM. You know, China is the world's largest market for automobiles. GM China sells more cars than they sell in United States. So this could have a lot of repercussions on the Sino-American trade relationship if they do go forward with a ban. I mean, it's too early to tell right now. I mean, they could end up watering down the language, and but I want to return back to the Taiwan. You know, in the $95 billion bill, there's $8 billion for Taiwan, and I have a feeling most of that money is just going to cycle back to the U.S. military-industrial complex. You know, in terms of weapon sales to Taiwan, because Taiwan is actually one of the biggest customers for the U.S. weapon systems. It has been a very good customer for decades, and they always buy these like outdated and useless weapon, but expensive weapon platform. Taiwan is buying Abrams tanks. What the hell? How are they going to do with Abrams tanks on Taiwan? I mean, by the time you need to use Abrams tanks, it's too late. You know, you're on an island, and so, but the people on Taiwan.
I'm stealing that one. I'm stealing that one. That's the best analysis I've ever heard.
I agree. I agree with you, Carl. I mean, you know, we're talking. The Americans are concerned about a provincial island that is 12,200 nautical miles away from the shores of the United States. But listen, we think, you know, both you and I say, oh, they'd be crazy if they ban TikTok. But look at the dismantling they've done of Huawei, to the extent that they went to absolutely obliterate this company. You know, they put a pretty high profile person under house arrest for years, Meng Wanzhou. I mean, this is the extent they'll go to if we think that they're just going to, you know, maybe let's push this in the courts. Let's get it, you know, push it down, kick the can down the street for a while. I don't think it's going to go like that. I think they are going to go full on with this. And I mean, DJI is on their list as well, the drone manufacturer. You could see many people in the United States saying, well, wait a moment, why would they ban DJI drones? You know, got to wonder. I mean, they do play a significant part in helping Ukraine, but, you know, not directly, but I mean, you could see from a retail standpoint, a lot of these drone manufacturers don't know that their products are being used or have any ability where they get eventually sold to. But my whole concern here is that, you know, people don't really understand how serious this TikTok thing is. I mean, there are 7 million American businesses that rely on this. There is, I think, a staggering number of about 180 million Americans have this application. I mean, if we go down the road to ban TikTok, which is very possible, it's not hard. I mean, you try to find a mobile phone here in China with a Google Play Store on it. It's not happening. You can't find it. You know, 5-6 years ago, every Android under the sun here in China, which surprises me because here's a massive market for Google, a massive market. Imagine that. Imagine somebody saying, hey, you got this great Play Store? Yeah. You got a bunch of app developers? Yeah. We could turn this store on to, I don't know, 1.2 to 1.5 billion people that could immediately buy these apps and use these apps. Oh, no. National security. Boom. We don't think it's happened, but it happened. And, you know, Google's out of here. You know, the Play Store's out of here. It's off the mobiles.
Well, Google left China because that's their decision.
Right, but Carl,
they didn't get banned by China. China says, okay, look, if you want to stay in China, you got to obey the Chinese laws. You have to store all the Chinese user data in China,
right?
And you have to obey the Chinese censorship
laws. And I agree.
And Google said, no, we're not going to do that, and we're going to leave. And they also did that because they're getting you know, they weren't the dominant player in China.
Yeah,
you know, Baidu was
but that just you're missing a little bit.
No. Let me finish. Google. I mean, TikTok is a whole different animal from Huawei.
I know.
In terms of visibility, you know, because Huawei okay, sure. Some people had Huawei phones, and like some people might vaguely aware that Huawei was building out telecom networks in the rural U.S. Rural areas. But TikTok, a lot of people know about TikTok. Huawei, there's no way the U.S. or Five Eyes was going to allow Huawei to build out 5G networks because
but
Huawei
they still
is
have
not going to. No. They're not going. There was no way they were going to allow Huawei because the U.S. intelligence services, they cannot get a backdoor through Huawei. They have backdoors in the other existing systems.
Right.
That's why they can listen into Angela Merkel. But the fact that they couldn't get a backdoor to Huawei, that means they have to ban it. I mean, that's why they didn't allow Huawei.
No, I
TikTok,
get.
Go ahead.
I get what you're saying, but I'm saying that the Google thing, that was the first step, and that didn't completely keep Google Play Store off of mobile phones. Then they started to go after the mobile phone manufacturers and say, okay, wait a minute, we won't give you access to using the Android Play Store. So that was the second death blow. And then you see the Canadian government, we're 5G network with Huawei, we won't allow it, even though 83% of Canada's 4G network is still powered by Huawei's product. It's still sitting on the telecommunication lines. And the Canadian government doesn't know what to do, how to rip these lines out, because it's going to cost multi-billions of dollars. So they either go back into the Stone Age or they deal with it. And I think this is what we're seeing here, is that now the time is running out. We're talking 6G already here, 6G plus, I think even. And these countries are starting to get outdated with this technology, and they're saying, wait a minute, we have to stop this at any cost. And when you see things like this passed in the House, where it goes over to the Senate, it will get support of the Senate.
But Alex,
yes,
just quick questions here.
Yep.
I'm literally the dumbest guy in the room, and I'm proud to be the dumbest guy in the room. But I did learn some military math, and it's very basic math. Okay, the House did this, and the Senate and the President. How many Americans are there again? I mean, I'm just working on this number, raw number, 340 million.
340 million. Yep.
How many Canadians are there?
39 million, 40 million.
Yeah, so together it's under 400 million, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the last 5-year plan, China brought 300 plus million people up into the middle class. China doesn't give a damn about the American population or the Canadian population. China doesn't give a damn about the European population. Carl, help me out on this one here. If Blinken follows through and starts sanctioning the Chinese financial system, how long will it take China to drop the dollar?
Well, I mean, then China will have no choice.
Correct. So it doesn't matter. Have no choice. So Blinken, right now, thank you for saying that. Right now, China doesn't want to drop the dollar because even though they're doing these deals, the dollar is still convenient. And China, at the end of the day, is business savvy. And so when you are doing a lot of transactions, the dollar transactions reduces the friction in your financial system. That's like the Russians didn't want to dump the dollar either until we unplugged them from the dollar. Then Russia had no choice. China, if we sanction China's financial institutions, it's instantaneous decision by China to unplug. Now China unplugs. Now you're the Russians, and the United States, because also contained in this ridiculous bill isn't just the TikTok thing. It's seizing $8 billion of Russian sovereign wealth and transferring to Ukraine. So now you're China sitting on a whole bunch of U.S. securities and everybody else. And the United States just said, we can rob you anytime we want to. Thank you very much for buying into the dollar system, but now we can rob you. How long will it take China to unplug? I know your answer. They have no choice. They have to unplug. So does the entire world. Now, while everybody's unplugging because America and Canada and Europe operate under the premise that the world needs us. No, we convenience the world for the moment, but the world doesn't need us. They like to have us because it saves money. But the second we become intolerably inconvenient, they will jettison us. And now we have something happening this year, and it's called the BRICS Forum in October. And all we've done is guarantee that at BRICS, because right now, and I know this firsthand, all these foreign ministries are sitting there getting ready to come to BRICS, and they're wrestling over issues such as the dollar, de-dollarization. Well, it's inconvenient for us. We don't want to de-dollarize on a rapid acceleration because we don't know what's going to happen, and we might lose a little bit of money. America is going to ruin your economy. Say that we're dumping the dollar. We need to come up with something now. You just made their life easier. Foreign ministers will now turn to the economic ministers and say, I don't want to ever hear anything again about staying with the dollar or dumping it. Move, find a solution. And that order is being given around the world. And when they come together in BRICS in October, thanks to the lunacy of the United States Congress, the idiocy of the Canadian Parliament, and everything else in between, the dollar is going to be dumped. The U.S. financial institutions are going to be dumped. You think this is about TikTok? This isn't about TikTok. This isn't about Huawei. This is about financial control of the world. And the Chinese, Indian, Russian, Eurasian, developing South economic world that is gathering through BRICS. And believe me, the more BRICS gets its act together, because there's a whole bunch of holdouts there going, oh man, we like that BRICS thing. We like that, but we got dollars. Oh God, we got to hang out with the SWIFT system and the dollars. It's inconvenient. But when BRICS and Russia and China solve the problem by being compelled to make the hard decisions, not because they want to, they were forced to. Carl just said it right. You have no choice. If Blinken puts sanctions on the Chinese financial system, do you think the Chinese are going to sit there and go, well, it's just a partial sanction of our financial system? Or the Chinese say, this is it. You started a fight. We told you never to do. It's now over. We're unplugging. Goodbye. It's going to cost us money, but we've dumped your securities. You're on your own. Free fall dollar, free fall U.S. economy. Stick it in your ear. We're moving on. And everybody else is sitting there going, damn, they're moving on. How long do you think it's going to take Colombia to go, dollar? Das Vidania.
I just think
this is suicide. The TikTok move is suicide by the U.S. Congress. Literal suicide. They're so stupid they don't see it.
I just want to add to that, like the Chinese don't want it to come to this, Scott, and that's the thing. They're trying to.
It doesn't matter what you want, Alex. Who cares what you want? It's what the other person does. I don't want the U.S. government to send me a tax bill every year. I really don't want them to do it, but they're going to do it, so I must be prepared for it. China may not want to unplug from the dollar, but when the United States attacks the very thing that makes their economy work, their financial institutions, you'd think China's just going to sit there and take that hit? No, they're not going to take that hit. They don't want to do this because it's inconvenient, but when you're given no other choice, you have to act. So China will unplug from the dollar. That's my bet. I don't see China allowing Tony Blinken to blackmail them over financial sanctions and say, oh, you're right, Tony. We've been wrong on everything we've been trying to do. 1 second. Vladimir Putin, yeah, we can't come to BRICS this year. I'm sorry. America's threatened our financial institutions with some serious sanctions. So we're unplugging from BRICS and we're just going to cave completely to the American imperial machine. Oh, by the way, since they've threatened our financial system, we're giving them Taiwan too. And I heard we're giving away Tibet, and we may give away the Uyghurs, and we're just going to allow our country. The Chinese aren't stupid. They're smart. They're savvy. They know what's going on here. They're not going to allow America to play this game. They've sat down with Blinken and Sullivan right with the beginning of the Biden administration in Alaska. Remember that meeting? And the Chinese, the Americans started their whole, we're American. The Chinese went, we don't care. You can't talk to us that way anymore. It's a whole new world. We're China. We're your equals. In some ways, we're better than you. So you better start treating us with respect, or we don't care anymore. And I think that's where China is right now. They don't care about America anymore. They would like to care about America. It'd be a nicer world if they did, if they could. But how can you care about somebody? It's like being in a relationship with somebody. You want to have a relationship, but they're stealing from you and robbing from you and undermining. At some point in time, you can't be in a relationship with them. America is the worst mistress in the world. The Chinese are expecting something. We're not giving them anything. Nothing. What benefit is there for China to stay in a relationship with the United States? What benefit? and there is none. Zero benefit. That's my.
I mean, interesting point, gentlemen. Another thing that I'd like to ask you, Scott. I mean, since you're over there, you know, does the average American talk about, you know, China's interest in the Belt and Road? Does the average American even know about it? The BRI
doesn't know anything about belts and roads. Doesn't know anything about. I mean, China is just like I said. China's the place that gave birth to General Tso's chicken. Because when I pick up the phone and I call the Chinese fast food place, I can get my General Tso's chicken. I can get, you know, bourbon chicken. I mean, how the hell did the Chinese come up with bourbon chicken? What the hell were the Chinese doing? Did they invent bourbon as well? My God, those Chinese are clever. Look, we don't know anything about China. We have a handful of China so-called experts, but again, you can't be a legitimate Chinese expert in America today. I live next door to one. All right. She actually has a PhD in Chinese history. She speaks the language fluently. She travels over there. They adopted Chinese children. She knows China. She loves China. She understands China. Nobody's going to listen to her because she's too damn smart. She knows the truth.
Can we bring her on the show?
I don't think she wants that kind of elevation. I think she's happy where she's at in life right now.
I was just thinking what Carl was thinking. I could see the wheels turning in Carl's. No.
My point is that that's not what we get. Instead, are these disgruntled cold warriors who, you know, came into maturity during the Reagan administration when, you know, China was bad. You know, and Tiananmen Square, you know, they keep throwing that meme up there and all that. And so they spin everything negative. I mean, they're, what's this guy? Cha? Is that his last name? Cha? You know who I'm talking about, Carl, right? This guy gets up there and he's over there. I mean, China's taking over the world. China's horrible. China's this, China. Nobody knows anything about the reality of China. One of the more interesting things of this friendship that I've developed in Russia is that my good friend Alexander Zuryanov, he does a lot of business in China. And it's always fascinating to hear him talk about China through his eyes because it's a learning experience for him. And there were Russian prejudices built in about China when he started, and to watch him work through those prejudices. And some other people too that I've met who are now, because of the West's behavior, Russia has pivoted to China, and just listen to them talk about discovering China. And, you know, it's amazing that, you know, they are seeing the reality of China, something that the American people will never understand. I don't know how many times. It's the same. I'll give you two things. One, about Russia and Africa. I mean, it doesn't matter what the reality is. All I hear, as soon as I say Russia and Africa, Wagner's in Mali committing war crimes. But Wagner's in Mali committing war crimes. But they're not. Wagner's in Mali committing war. That's all they can say. That's all the programs say. Belt and Roads Initiative. They're going in and they're stealing the port from Sri Lanka. They went in there and they undercut Sri Lankan economy and they're stealing the port. And nobody wants Belt and Roads Initiative anymore because the Chinese just steal everything. But that's not what happened. Yes, it is. How do you know? Because Mr. Cha told me on CNN. Oh, you're a genius. The whole point is, even when they do bother learning about belts and roads, they're limited by what they access. And I'm talking about some very smart people. I put in my worst dumb American accent when I did that. But why don't we change it to some very smart? I mean, because, you know, Americans, we are some of the dumbest people on the planet. But we immediately, if we hear somebody with a British accent, we assume intelligence. So we could just change it. Well, I say, the Chinese have gone into Sri Lanka and they've done a rather bloody business there. They've undercut the Sri Lankan economy. Oh my God, it's a British accent. Genius! The dude is a genius! Yes, it's bad. You know, so that's why we read The Economist and we read the Financial Times, because it puts a British accent on this, and we go, them damn Brits are so smart. They know everything. They know nothing. That's why their economy is flailing. That's why our pathetic middle-sized nation that's in collapse. That's why they have no influence in the world beyond what they hold on to because of empire. But no, the Chinese are running. Carl, what is $7 to $10 trillion that the Belts and Roads Initiative has put in to the global economy since 2013? I mean, it's a ridiculous number, a ridiculous number. And it's created, you saw Janet Yellen, again, I'm not the expert, but Janet Yellen just came back, the confusion in her face when she was talking about China, because she wanted to get really mad at them. But what are you mad about, Janet? The Chinese have developed a global supply chain that's just too big and we can't compete. Well, no kidding. That's what happens when you spend $7 to $10 trillion building connectivity with the global economy instead of spending trillions of dollars blowing up the Middle East, you stupid woman. I mean, my God, if the Americans would take the Chinese approach, I mean, I feel bad for the Chinese now because they're building aircraft carriers. Don't. You don't need them. They don't work. You guys know because you've built missiles to sink our aircraft carriers. We have missiles that sink yours. Stop building aircraft carriers. Continue to do the Belts and Roads Initiative. You're winning. But no, the Chinese, somebody has convinced them that they have to have a blue water navy that can stand up to the Americans. It's a bad business model, guys. It doesn't work. Just look at America. But the Belts and Roads Initiative works like a champ, and it's been dominating. There's things that the great downfall. There it is. The debt trap diplomacy. The wheels are coming off. I mean, my God, if you listen to them, China's about to collapse because but look at the expansion of that. That map proves that Belts and Roads is too big to fail. There's nothing that can compete with it. Now, have the Chinese made mistakes? They will be the first to tell you they've made mistakes. They'll be the first to tell you that they went in and some of the deals that they cut. You know what China does that nobody else does? And correct me on this again, Carl, if I'm wrong, but they go in and they actually renegotiate deals so that they don't make as much money, so that they reduce some of the, probably because they realize, oops, they can't pay it back. China's gone in and forgiven billions and done things. Why? Because they want to continue the business relationship, because it's not about ripping off this nation. It's about making sure that this nation, this port is plugged into a system. So the Chinese will, reduce profits or eliminate profits here to make the entire enterprise profitable. The Chinese know that if they get, if the accusations stick here, other people will not want to be part of it. So the Chinese make it work for everybody. We don't. This is why there is no Western equivalent of Belts and Roads, because everywhere we come in, we have interests. I mean, I don't want to pick on it, but you want us to build that port? Yes, sir. We'd like you to build that port. Great. How's your transgender policy? What? Well, no. We can't build the port unless you have a transgender policy. But we were talking about ports. Yes, we're talking transgendered now. See, America brings in social values. We come in and we insist that you have to do everything we want to change, fundamentally change who you are. The Chinese don't give a damn who you are. The Chinese just want to build a port so they can bring in ships, offload goods that you buy. That's business. So, and I know I'm oversimplifying it, but the Chinese approach is a much more straightforward business approach than the American approach, and it's working. The Belts and Roads Initiative is everywhere, and we don't know it. We don't understand it. I don't think the Biden administration could get away with it, or Congress could get away with their anti-Chinese statements if the American public was actually educated about the truth about China. First of all, let me just put it this way. If we knew the truth, stop persecuting trannies, Scott. Hey, red herring, I'm not persecuting them. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. It's not about me making this an issue. America makes it an issue everywhere we go. And there's reason why some nations don't want to do business with us, because of the way we come in and try to socially rework their traditional family values. Ask the Republic of Georgia why they don't like half of what America's doing in there. It comes down to traditional values and America trying to impose an American mechanism. The Chinese just want to do business. That's what I believe. But the truth is, though, is if we actually knew the truth about the Belts and Roads Initiative, it would scare us even more. Because the Chinese are doing it so good, so well, we can't compete. And that's the reality of it, that we are at a point right now where I think we're so far behind the competition curve that it doesn't matter how much money we put in, we can't compete, which means that for us to succeed, we're going to have to learn how to grab the coattails of Belts and Roads. we continue to operate that we can beat them at this game. I think the day of beating belts and roads is over. What we need to do is become a part of the belts and roads and see how much we can benefit from that. Look at again, Carl, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole idea of the India Middle East economic corridor that Biden was promoting there for a while before Israel imploded was a competition to Belts and Roads Initiative, right? I mean, that's what he said. This is competing with the Chinese. Does China have any input at all into Mumbai? I'm sure if we dug around Mumbai, we'd find that there was Chinese investment. But let's say the Indians have total control of the Mumbai port. They don't have total control of Gwadar. You just pointed that out there. That's a big port Pakistan putting on there. But this is the India Middle East economic corridor. Okay, so they send their ships over and they get off at Dubai. Is there any Chinese connectivity to Dubai? I think there is. And then when they come out of the Chinese controlled port in Dubai, and how did that Chinese controlled port come to be? Belts and roads. Oh yeah. And then they're going to put it on the train because they're talking about this train connectivity from the United Arab Emirates through Saudi Arabia, through Jordan into Israel. But when you link up with the UAE train system, what's the primary contractor for the UAE train? China. You link in with the Saudis, who's the primary contractor for the Chinese rail? China. Belts and roads. Then you work your way through Jordan. I don't know anything about China and Jordan right now, but let's say they build a train there. I'd imagine that China, since they dominate the train market, would dominate the Jordanian train market. It goes into Israel to the port of Haifa. Didn't China just spend billions of dollars upgrading the Haifa port so it can have this kind of throughput? So that's belts and roads. Now they put it on ships and they take it to Greece, and that port they were going to go in Greece, that is the poster child of Belts and Roads Initiative in Europe. So basically, Joe Biden, to compete against the Chinese Belts and Roads Initiative, plugged into the Belts and Roads Initiative. At least be honest about it, Joe. The Chinese beat you. And that's how we have to do it. We have to stop talking about competing with the Chinese and start talking about working with the Chinese. And maybe at some point in time, that we can turn the curve and say, hey, now we can start, having some input into this, because the Chinese are businessmen. If you get a junior partner and the junior partner comes in and starts doing things really good, you're like, hey, junior partner, you're now senior partner. I'm bringing it up to the top floor. You got the big desk. You just sit around the meeting. That's how America could come in. Just be good at doing what we do, but we're not good. All we can do is war. And then we bully people in. And as a result, the Chinese have convinced the rest of the world that the Belts and Roads Initiative is the best way forward. And again, this is going to plug into BRICS. If people don't understand what's about to happen in BRICS, I'll bring up a Game of Thrones. They watch that in China. They see Game of Thrones, that series. All right, that great series. I loved it. Final season, Jaime Lannister. They just took over High Garden, and they're bringing the gold back to pay off the bankers, the Iron Bank. They're going to pay them off with all the gold. And old Daenerys is really pissed off because she got fooled around. So she and the Dothraki and the dragon are coming. And there's a scene there where you got all the Lannister guys lined up, and here come the Dothraki and the dragon, and the Sir Blackwater turns to Jaime and goes, they're getting ready to swamp us. Get out of here. And that's what BRICS, the West right now is the Lannister army sitting there thinking they got this under control. They're sitting there, shields and spears. We got this guy. And they're sitting there looking at it. And here's coming BRICS, the Dothraki. And China is the dragon. And it's over. They're going to swamp you. That's what's happening in October. And the world doesn't understand that yet. We're still thinking that we're going to beat them, that we can hold this back. It's over. They're going to swamp us. Now, the best bet right now is that we don't want to end up like those guys, remember, that were told to bend the knee or the dragon's going to burn you. We don't want to be that. What we need to do right now is say, China, whoa, stop. We don't need to fight. We can work together, join forces, do something, but we don't need to be swamped by BRICS. But that's not how we operate. We don't know how to operate from an inferior position, but we are an inferior economy right now.
See, Scott, it doesn't have to be that way because U.S. actually is leading in certain areas. For example, semiconductors. China was importing like $450 billion worth of semiconductors. China spent more importing semiconductors than China spent on importing oil. And a lot of the semiconductor technology either originate or come from the United States. Because China is a factory of the world, it produces everything. So, but semiconductors is in everything. It's in refrigerators. It's in cell phones. It's in laptops. So as Chinese economy was growing, the Chinese dependency on semiconductor was growing. So the Chinese dependency on United States was actually growing before Biden slapped on the semiconductor sanction on China.
And then what happened?
Then China is forced to develop their own semiconductor capability because, like, before, China was perfectly happy to buy from the United States. Huawei was perfectly happy to buy Qualcomm chips, as other Chinese companies. But U.S. is saying, no, sorry, Qualcomm, you can't sell to China. Sorry, NVIDIA, you cannot sell your AI chips to China. So Huawei has no alternative but develop their own domestic suppliers.
But here's the thing. In the West, we have a model, you see, because I know how Western policymakers think. The Chinese, it's going to take them forever to catch up because the Western model is, what would we do? How much would we have to invest? And it's prohibitive because we don't have a market sustainability. We have, we get 340 million Americans, that's our market base. And so it's too expensive, prohibitively expensive. The Chinese will be behind. The Chinese went, we got 1.4 billion people. So we're just going to recruit the best and the brightest, and we're going to bring them together, and we're going to do a rapid thing. Am I right? Again, I'm not a semiconductor. I'm not an expert on just about anything, just so people know that. I'm honest about this. But my understanding is that one of the key aspects of this microchip business is there's lithography, a lithograph machine that comes from the Netherlands, I believe, is the place that produces it. And they had some of them in Taiwan, and they didn't want this technology transferring over to China, so they put a ban on that. And by doing that, you limit China's ability to make the really fine stuff that prevents them from getting into, and there's a certain designation of the chip. And we said, we're going to deny this chip. China will be stuck here forever. And I think in less than a year, the Chinese have not only developed this lithography technology, they've surpassed it, and they're producing chips. I don't know if they're mass producing them yet, but they have produced conceptual chips that are better than the chips that needed. So the concept that we were going to disrupt China from transition into, I know that Alex was talking about 6G technology, but the Chinese are already into 7G. I think they're fooling around with this stuff. All we did is accelerate China's own internal development to now not only are they not dependent upon Western technology, they've surpassed us and they're moving forward, and we just made it easier for them. And this is my point on this is the same thing I said about the financial system. The Chinese don't want to unplug from the dollar. They don't want to do all this because they're happy with this balance. They're happy. The Chinese are all about balance. Balance is necessary. Life is about balance. The Chinese, I was going to say yin and yang. That is a Chinese thing, I hope. I'm not going to throw a Japanese philosophy at the yin and the yang, the balance. It's all about balance. They don't want to rip you off. They want balance. They want harmony. And so there was a harmonious relationship financially, a harmonious relationship in terms of the chips, and we screwed it up. And so now the Chinese, I don't know if they've totally conquered the chip problem, but they're well on their way to conquering the chip problem. They don't need the West anymore. The West opted out. And then so China's, going to win this one too. And they're going to do the same thing on the finances. I just have a feeling that all the hard decisions that people didn't want to make because it's not harmonious are going to have to be made in October in BRICS. And at the end of that, the dollar, like the Dutch lithographic machine, will be a thing of the past because the Chinese will have developed something new.
Well, that's what I'm saying, Scott. It doesn't have to be that way. China, it could have been a win-win situation for both China and United States to grow together. But the U.S. government, by its own decisions, it's all the problem with the U.S. empire today. Almost like 90% of it is self-inflicted problems. So it's not because China, not because of Russia that's trying to sabotage the U.S. system. It's a self-inflicted sanctions. We slapped a sanction on Russia to force them out of the dollar system. We are slapped on the chip sanction on China to force them to develop indigenous chip manufacturing capabilities. It didn't have to be this way. I mean, there's no reason why the Earth is big enough for United States, Russia, and China. But somehow, people in Washington, they think it has to be a zero-sum game. It's everything for me and none for you. And I can only get ahead if you lose. And so I like Putin was right during his interview with Tucker Carlson. He said, unless the U.S. ruling elite get rid of this kind of supremacy mentality, the mentality that the hegemonic mentality that U.S. has to be number one, has to be the world hegemon, nothing is going to change. It doesn't matter who is going to be the president, whether Biden or Trump. You're going to come up with the same policy, if not shittier. But Trump is the one who started all these China sanctions. Biden came out and just made it worse. And so I mean, like, it's almost like I have U.S. passport. I'm a Chinese American, so I actually, it's in my vested interest to see China and U.S. get along, work together. But in the last 8-10 years, I mean, I have been very disappointed in the direction the U.S. government is going, and it's getting worse. It's getting worse. But maybe I can ask you, why do you think the elite in Washington is leading us down that path? I mean, like, can they see that? No, can they just leave things alone? Like, why do they have to make it worse? Like, what? At the
beginning of the show, we talked about the supplemental funding package that was just voted on, and I went through my reasoning why this had nothing to do with real national security policy or foreign policy, and everything to do with domestic American political issues. It's the same with China. Yes, we have some businessmen. First of all, most American businessmen, if they're realistic, we're willing to do business in China. A lot of people are doing business in China. When you're talking about, my brother-in-law produced, he produced small rubber parts. I mean, for everybody who opens up their cabinet, their clothing drawer, those little washers that make the drawer come out nicely. He makes those. He makes all the little rubber parts that make life worth living. And they do die and mold production, blah, 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 blah. But he was looking at a business model here in the United States, and it came down to, if he opened up a business in China that did this, the scale, the cost of everything, suddenly what was a marginal business became immensely profitable, and the potential to move it. There were some downsides. I mean, he had a niche business with American defense industry. So if you're making parts for something, you can't make those parts in China. It's the whole way. So you keep it. Now, what allowed that niche industry to continue was the profits that were being made in China, and so American business was getting on with China. We were exploiting the scope and scale of the Chinese economy. Businessmen weren't unhappy. Politicians are unhappy. That's the problem. You see, in America, we need to stoke fear amongst the American population to do things that keep the existing political and economic elite in power. And again, going back to Eisenhower, the military-industrial congressional complex, we need a state of perpetual conflict in the world to justify the kind of disproportional emphasis we place on defense spending and things of that nature. We need an enemy. We need a threat. And it has to be regional in nature. So even though we have a nice, convenient threat in Russia, the thing is, we need a threat in the Pacific. And so China has become that threat. It's the perpetual threat. Now, our solution for Russia and China was to get them to basically yield to us, bend the knee, and become subservient to us. That's what we tried to do with Russia in the 1990s. And believe it or not, that's what we were trying to do with China in the 1980s and 90s. The whole idea of introducing capitalism to China was to bring about the end of the Chinese Communist Party and get China to become subservient to us. That big Chinese market would be linked to the American industrial machine. We'd be exploiting that, but the Chinese did it better, just like the Russians had Putin come out and say, we're not going to do that. So now we instead of learning to live in peace and harmony with equals, we don't know how to live with equals. We need to turn them into the enemy. And this is the reality of China right now. China will forever be our enemy because we have to have a Chinese enemy. If we don't have a Chinese enemy, how do we explain our politics in the Pacific? How do we explain our policies? And so our politicians, they're not about determining what the truth is about China. They are about sustaining the fiction about China. They are about exploiting the existing prejudices built into the American nation, the American people about China, just the same way we do with Russia. The Russophobia is matched by the Sinophobia that exists in America today. And this is what our politicians are about. They're not. When was the last time we had a Senate hearing that tried to tell the truth about China? When was the last time we said, let's bring in real, genuine Chinese experts? No, when we have Senate hearings, we bring in the Chas and the Huans and all these haters out there who publish papers about how bad the Chinese Communist Party is. Look, even Tucker Carlson, who many Americans appreciate for what he's done with trying to expose the lies about Russia. On China, he's a total closed mind. Others are too. I got in trouble the other day about John Mearsheimer. I don't know if it was on this show or something else. I accused John Mearsheimer. I said maybe he needs to go to China, and apparently he goes to China a lot, and he interacts with Chinese a lot. So I stand corrected on that. But just because you go to China and interact with China doesn't necessarily mean you're getting it right on China, because you still have the prejudices that go in. The bottom line is, I'm not saying China's perfect. I'm not saying that that it's an easy path to Chinese-American improved relations. I think actually it will be a very long and rocky road. We've got a lot of things we got to overcome on both sides, but it's a path that's doable. If we would just sit down and start talking to people realistically about the real problems that we face, how can we overcome this? But you can't do that if I'll just leave it at this. It's something I say all the time. You can't solve a problem that you haven't properly defined. If we're not going to sit there and be honest about what the Chinese problem is, and say this is the problem, whatever solution we come up with is solving nothing. That solution instead is nothing more than political cover to allow us to pursue policies that are pleasing to the voter but doesn't solve any problems. And a prime example of that is TikTok. Total garbage policy, total garbage approach. But we made it the law. We're going to try and ban TikTok. It doesn't make any sense, but Americans fear Russia, fear China. We're told that TikTok is spying on everything we do. The reason why I got a cold this morning is because of TikTok. TikTok gave me a cold. And, we have to ban TikTok, but that's it. We're just dealing with an overwhelming level of ignorance in America today about China and the reality of China, and therefore we're unable to come up with solutions to this problem.
I want to bring something up. I just want to show you guys on the screen here. This is the current trading of the S&P 500, and I'm going somewhere with this. Not sure if this audience is aware that I am a derivative trader for over 20 years and been trading these financial instruments for 2 decades. I just want to give you a snapshot. Currently, right now, we see 4,985 handle on the S&P. And just mark that number for a moment there. That is the U.S. top 500 companies by market cap. Now, hold your hat on this one here. And we will go to another screen here. And this is actually my trading screen, my trading platform. You probably can't see it very clearly, but look at the insurance. These are derivatives on the S&P 500. when you see open interest of 1,138 contracts with a 50 multiplier, what that means is there are a lot of banks, financial institutions around the world, and we'll go right here and we'll click on that are putting insurance on the S&P, which is 74.6% off the market for December, 13 to 1,400 on the S&P.
Alex, just a sec. Which stock should I short?
No, it's not about shorting. But thank you. What I'm saying is, in 20 years of trading, I have not personally seen that type of open interest on the market. And that right now sends shockwaves to me, seeing that if people are insuring the S&P 500 down at 1,300 points, that's a 74.6% drop. All the way down here, you can see it, 57% off the market, 1,716 open contracts. These are mega contracts, and it's big money. And the concern to me is I haven't seen this in many years. And this shows me that people are very concerned about November. And that just resonates here again when I start to see these contracts, and I'm starting to get some people here. Yeah, that is the December put options there, expecting some serious things to happen in December. Jonathan, you've hit it right on the nail there.
What do I need to do to make money in December? Just give me the easy here. Do I need to buy stocks or sell stocks, or what do I need to do? What's your strategy, man?
No, I'm just saying, Scott, that when you're talking about instability, or when you're talking about nations paying attention to certain dates, people are really watching November. And from a geopolitical standpoint, whenever there's moves in the market, and we call it volatility, the best volatility index is the VIX. I don't know if ever, I don't want to get into this too much. I don't want to bore people here, but the volatility index on the United States is called the VIX. Let me just bring this up just to show you guys what I'm talking about.
Scott, okay. If you want stock tips, ask Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is the best stock picker in Congress.
She's beating the market reliably.
So this is the volatility index, the CBOE, and I'm just going to show you guys the 5-year graph on this thing. You guys can probably sense what that is. 3rd of March 2020. Okay, that's when the pandemic was hitting its peak.
Yep.
And that's a 66 handle on the VIX. That means that's when the S&P fell almost 43% in a month there. Right now, we're seeing a small uptick in it. And to me, it's relatively all calm. But what triggers this is now I'm kind of concerned here where we have, a lot of action going on in December. So that means that, are we in for a surprise in November elections? I mean, what other news can we anticipate? Because in the option market, in the derivatives market, I've had this argument 1,000 times. The action always happens first in the derivatives market, and then it falls into the stock market. Maybe we can get some people in the chat here to maybe let us know, give us your opinion, and I'll let these gentlemen back to talk. But let us know.
I've got to run because I've got to take my wife to a very important appointment. So I am her Uber. And unless you can give me a stock tip that allows me to make enough money to buy a driver and a car, I got to go.
Got it. Scott, I'm gonna let you go. You can say goodbye to Carl here, and then I'll end it up with Carl. We'll stick around for a few minutes.
All right, Carl. Good talking to you, Carl. I apologize if I stepped on you. I was really hoping to let you speak, but unfortunately, Alex pulled the string.
People in chats are telling me to shut up because they want to listen to you. So I'm following their advice.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, Scott. We'll see you in a few weeks. Okay. Take care, sir.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, Carl. Yeah, sorry. I'm just going to read some of these comments here. What some people were saying about it. Some people saying derivatives described as weapons of mass destruction. Pretty accurate, I'd have to say that. For some of the people out there, if you're watching the financial markets, give us your thoughts on what you guys are thinking. What could potentially be moving these markets or making these markets nervous that people are putting bets on around the October, November, and December of this year. Just having some more stuff. Carl, I'm going to pass it over to you, and I'm going to just scroll through these comments for a bit here, and you can tell us what you've been up to and tell everybody where to find you, okay?
Well, hello guys. I'm Carl ZHA. It's my show now. Welcome to Silk and Steel Podcast. I'm your host, Carl ZHA. I am in Bali, Indonesia, and I have I'm a prolific shit poster on Twitter. You can find my handle. My handle is just Carl ZHA on Twitter, and I have my own YouTube channel, Carl ZHA. Some of you are watching me there right now, and I do run my Silk and Steel podcast on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com, search for Silk, the first result should be Silk and Steel Podcast, which is my podcast, where I talk about everything about China, history, culture, and politics. And I also do a chronological retelling of the Chinese history from the very beginning and at some point to the present. But currently, I just recorded an episode where I talk about 532 BC China. So I have a long way to go. And what Alex is saying about November surprise. I mean, look, at this point, Biden is going to need an October surprise if he wants to win against Trump, because right now I think Trump. I think Biden is going to be out of the office in 8 months. I don't see how he could pull up the numbers to win at this point, because he's not going to win Michigan. He's alienated all the Muslim voters. They're not going to come out to vote for him in Michigan, and Michigan is a big battleground state. And yeah, the Biden actually recent sanction on he raised the tariffs on the Chinese steel, and that was he's trying to win Pennsylvania. He's trying to win the votes from the steel workers in Pennsylvania, and this is why Nippon Steel, the Japanese steel company, is also having trouble to acquire the U.S. steel. The acquisition is kind of getting stuck in a limbo because it's election season in the United States, and everything. Like, I think one of the things that Scott pointed out that was very enlightening for me was the whole funding, the congressional funding bill. It was all political football. He's absolutely right. Whether Republicans or Democrats, they don't care about any of these issues. They don't care about the border issue. They don't really care about Ukraine. This is just all political theater. They're doing it for their either voter base or their the people who actually pay their bills, their funders. They're just putting up a performance. After all that, they're all gonna go hang out and party with each other. Like before they would go to Epstein's Island. Now maybe they have a new hangout place. This is a uniparty. This is a U.S. American uniparty government we're talking about. All these elites are all in bed with each other. So I don't know. Where do you want me to go with this?
Well, I see what you're saying. But let's bring this around a bit here. I mean, Carl, you and I have known each other a few years here. I mean, do you really think that we're going to see, this election here in November make any difference? I mean, we've just seen what happened in the House. The entire Democrats supported the House majority.
I haven't believed in the electoral process since since Obama. Okay, like Obama for a brief period of time, I believed in change. I believed in Obama, but after Obama, like hell no. You know, they're all the same. They're all corrupt. You know, this and people and you know, and after they screw DNC screws up Sanders to put Hillary Clinton on ballot. You know, of all the people that could pick, they could have beaten Trump. You know, even Bernie Sanders. But no, but they got to pick Hillary Clinton. And then they blame it on the Russian disinformation campaign. It's like you could have just better pick a better candidate. And it's so right now I don't really care. You know, Biden, Trump, they're all the same.
I mean, maybe everybody in the chat could tell us where you guys are from. Of course, I'm sitting here in China in Chongqing. Carl, I don't know if you want to disclose your location, but you can if you want.
I'm in Bali, Indonesia. I'm wearing an Indonesian shirt. This is a batik shirt.
I think it's important for people to understand that, you know, we are here in a part of the world, and we're trying to imagine, you know, after watching what happened in the U.S. yesterday with all that funding and money going towards the military, none towards the border. I mean, how
towards Hawaii? None towards Hawaii. Hawaii,
but,
you know,
Mali? Are you
Ukraine,
talking about Mali or
Hawaii
or Maui?
Yeah,
after Maui.
Yeah. After, you know, they're sending $60 billion to Ukraine. They're spending $200 million loans. No, not grants. They're sending $290 million federal loans to Hawaii. I mean, it's almost like Hawaii is a U.S. colony or something. You know, they you know, taking second. I mean, I understand everything have to take a second fiddle to Israel because, you know, Israel is a golden child, but even Ukraine gets the top billing. So, you know, they don't, others elite, they don't care about the average Americans. They don't.
But the average American, let's talk about the average American, which I'd like to hear your guys' feedback in the chat here. I mean, are people pissed off? I mean, I can't see it. I'm not walking the streets of the United States right now. Have people had it? Are they pissed off at both parties? Are they angry at the Democrats? Are they angry at the Republicans? Have they had enough? I mean, I know that, you know, my wife's country of Lithuania, some friends we used to have there watch my show, and they not such good friends anymore because they're just like, hey, Julia, what? You know, your husband's not going. He's not going along with the line. You know, where's the flags and the how? You know, and it's you really get to know. I know if I went back to Canada and sat down and had dinner at the Keg with my family, I'd probably be kicked out because people would say, you know, I'm not going to sit, you know, there and have people who have clearly been hit with propaganda. I'm going to call it for what it is. I mean, Americans and Canadian media, they know how to really pump it in. And Australia, if you watch some of these Australian shows about China, I mean, they're like, TikTok is coming to you. Watch your children. And then they show this little child in the bedroom with a light on their face. China is going right into your bedroom now. And you just like, you're watching the show. And then I'm thinking, wait a minute, God damn it, Australian. And it's 60 minutes in Australia. These guys can convince you of anything. After watching 20 minutes of it, it's like, well, maybe just, oh, fuck, this is bullshit, right? So, I mean, it shows you how powerful these media engines is. And being here in China, you know, China needs to defend itself more, Carl. China needs to go on the offensive more on the media. I mean, you actually.
But look, Alex, Putin during his interview with Tucker Carlson, he said, you know, it's pointless trying to fight Americans on propaganda front because they will win. Americans will win the propaganda war because they have already dominated the airwave, especially the English language. And you know, U.S. invented marketing, Alex. if something that U.S. can do very well today is U.S. top the world in the copium production. U.S. is very good at producing propaganda, and so I mean, people. I think this is why for a lot of people who are starting to waken up to all the BS in the mainstream media, whether on the domestic affair or in the Middle East or Latin America, even among those people, a lot of them are still kind of anti-China because they have been told for decades that China is bad.
Sorry, Carl. Let me bring this comment up, and I'm going to see if you're going to get this, because this is a person that says, "Talk about powerful. How about the CCP state propaganda?" So
you kidding me? The Chinese propaganda. People think this Chinese propaganda is this powerful machine. Well,
but the moment, Carl, that I see CCP instead of CPC shows you right there where the propaganda is coming from. Right there.
Does this person that believes that China has this powerful propaganda, does he watch Chinese media channels? Does he watch CGTN? How many Americans watch CGTN? And like where do you consume the Chinese propaganda? I compared to the American corporate propaganda, Chinese propaganda is pretty weak, man. It's the game. It's pretty weak. I have to say, it's they could have do a better job. If they do a better job, they will be like RT, and then they will get banned. RT get banned from YouTube because they're actually starting to appeal to a certain segment of the U.S. population, and that our elite can't allow that. So the fact that they still allow CGTN to exist on YouTube, and they still allow CGTN on cable TV in U.S., that means the U.S. government is not scared of Chinese propaganda. It poses no threat to them.
No, I mean, it's really interesting. When you see things packaged, like we get people here, like again, I'm going to just tell the audience, I'm here in China. I'm in a city in southwest China, actually Carl's hometown of Chongqing. Funny that I'm here and you're not. We've had this discussion many of times, but I get people telling me what China is like. And they've never been here. And I've been inviting YouTubers to this city here for about 3 years. They come in, they put videos out about them. And it's kind of like, you'll see instant trolls come into their things. Oh yeah, you're on this, tour, and how much did the government pay you and all that stuff. And after a while, it gets a bit creepy because you start to wonder, what's really motivating these people to go on this? Like we got lots of them in the chat tonight here, and I kind of like it a bit that we have some of these people that kind of
anything to help the algorithm, Alex. Anything to help the algorithm. I love it when people hate watch me. That you actually help me.
Okay,
up my numbers
let me give you the biggest one that I've tried to. When I go out into the town here and I'm reading some of the comments, like, for example, my channel, you'll see I have a lot of videos on China, talking about infrastructure, talking about, I think the latest one you guys saw, somebody asked me where the link is. Just go to my channel. You'll see it, the Belt and Road Initiative. That was the video I made, and you guys can watch it. But when you start to read these comments, and it starts to repeat itself, and these posts start to look repetitive, and they're almost saying the same narrative, and you can almost trace it back to maybe a news article or a certain part of propaganda in the West. And this is what I'm talking about. When I start to see comments on my videos, first of all, I pin the ones that are probably the most negative, because it's enjoyable to watch somebody receive 1,000 emails response from their post. But we call it the clown show. But you know, I had an instant last year where I started to see a pattern. It was like, whoa, wait a minute. These people are saying the same message and they keep going. And where's this coming from? And you track it back. And then I don't know if everybody who's still watching saw a bunch of videos last year talking about China's economy collapsing. And these were on channels that had nothing, absolutely zero to do with China. And you're wondering, wait a minute, were these videos paid to talk about China? Because there is a massive fund in the United States,
$500 million.
$500 million. And that can buy them a lot of negative YouTube videos. And you have to, as a content creator, Carl, you know damn well that some of these channels out there that put out those videos, guaranteed they were paid to put up these pieces. And I even questioned a few of them. I got an interesting response by one, and another one I got, why would you ask that question? More of a nervous response. But yeah,
it's
I don't
a yes
know.
or no question.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, you know, we talk about this this propaganda, but you know, most people here in China do like. There's not this really stress in the media here where you get it in the United States where it's going to pull you this way. And nothing against America. I mean, hey, there's a lot of things I like about the United States, but some things that cause friction are inaccurate reporting. The best way I can explain this is I had a Chinese friend that just recently returned from Europe, and he had 3 books on World War II. And I said, you know, Elvin, why did you buy 3 books on World War II? You know, and he says, well, I spent an hour in the library and I read a chapter in each one of them, and all 3 of them told a different story about World War II. So he says, I'm going to have to read 3 or 4 books to come up with the right conclusion. And when you start to hear somebody gathering books, well, it's the same thing, you know. This is what happens. We have to use 3 or 4 different news outlets to try to weed through it in North America, where if you watch a guy like Alex Christoforou or Alexander McCurse or Cyrus Jansen or Daniel Dumbrill, a good friend of ours, Carl Zaw as well, we spend hours weeding through this garbage to finally come up with, you know, the truth. And this is what's shocking, that it you know, I have an 80-year-old mother who loves geopolitics, okay? And she said it takes her 2 to 3 hours to go through the nonsense and then eventually get the picture. And this is, you know, a pretty crazy world when you think about it, and how much things are not factual anymore. Like, when did and I'm going to ask you this, and before I tell you this, I was given some advice from an old guy a couple of years ago, and he says, Alex, go out and buy yourself an entire last final edition of Britannica when it was in printed mode. Put it in your basement, leave it there. And I said, well, I can get it online. He says, well, you realize that the Wikipedia on French history is manipulated almost 3 times a day. So, and of course, you know, Wikipedia is not the greatest place for information, but he's saying that pretty much the last printed copy of any, you know, last unaltered material is a set of encyclopedias that you should just buy and throw them in your basement. I mean, what can we believe out there anymore? Where is the truth?
I mean, in U.S., I can speak for U.S. media. That's what I'm familiar with. You just have to know how to read the news. You have to know what their angle is. You know, what's their slant. You know, like Wall Street Journal, they're always gonna be speaking to the business, right? That's what their audience is. And New York Times, big liberal, liberal paper, but they always push for wars. There's no wars that New York Times doesn't like. You know, they shelved for the Iraq War back in 2003, and they shelved for the Afghanistan War. New York and they are like fully behind U.S. support for Israel. So you have to know which where they stand, and then you gotta kind of know how to read the news. You only gain that skill after you kind of wade through them for a while. Because I used to read like New York Times daily. When I was in high school, I delivered New York Times. So I for 10 years I read New York Times every day. But after a while, you kind of develop a knack for it. You know, like you kind of know, like almost like the reporting on China almost come from a template. You know, like they just change the name somewhat. And so you kind of not just know how to read the news. I mean, but most people don't have the time. You know, most people, they just read the headlines. They just read, and the headlines are always the most sensational headline, just trying to catch your eyeballs. And so a lot of times, if you read the headline, is China is collapsing. China is collapsing. And I think another reason is these newspapers, they're trying to sell, they're trying to get views, get eyeballs. So they also try to sell, not only make it sensational, but they also want to appeal to what they think their readers want to read. Because, you know, the more problems U.S. have internally, you know, the worse that China will appear on in the mainstream media, because they will think, oh, okay, sure, U.S. is bad, but at least China have it worse. You know, at least we're not collapsing as bad as China is doing right now. So a lot of the time that when the U.S. media talk about China, it's 100% projection. They're not really talking about China as a real place. They're talking about China in their imagination, like this bizarre world of China where everything is dystopian. And so it makes the reader, the consumer of New York Times and Wall Street Journal feels like, okay, you know, I know things are bad here. At least it's not as bad as China. You know, it can only be worse.
I want your take. You know, when I met you, you know, Daniel Dumbrell told me you were a walking encyclopedia, and I had a great time when I met you in Beijing. It was funny. I was messaging Carl saying, "Oh man, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm on my way to Beijing." I said, "Yeah, so am I, Carl. How are things going with you?" "Oh, good. Where are you going?" "Oh, I'm going to the Great Wall." I said, "Well, so am I." And then the next thing you know, we're at the same hotel. So we met each other. But let me ask you this. I don't know how you're going to answer this. So I'm a little bit, let me read this. Let me read this to you. On December 25th, 1991, the Soviet hammer and sickle flag lowered for the last time over the Kremlin, thereafter replaced by the Russian tricolor. Earlier in the day, Mikhail Gorbachev resigned his post as president of the Soviet Union, leaving Boris Yeltsin as the president of the new independent Russian state. I recently watched a movie on Amazon, and they were talking about a hockey team that the Americans brought over, and they were trying to bring hockey to Russia, or pardon me, the Soviet Union, and in a more commercial standpoint. And it really showed me that America's intentions at the time, I don't know how to get into this conversation, but do you feel around that time that possibly if America would have stepped away and, you know, because countries go through recessions and depressions. I mean, America went through it in the 1920s. You know, Canada wasn't a glorious country when I was born in the 70s, and we were still driving down dirt roads. And then you have the oil issue in the late 1970s, probably 77, 78. You know, hyperinflation, massive mortgage rates up as high as 18%. All is not, rosy. My issue here is do you think if America would have stayed out of that part of the world, that we would still see the Soviet Union rebound?
You mean
Not
after
collapse, not collapse at all. Do you think that was a pushed?
Okay. I see what you're saying. You're saying, did U.S. cause the Soviet collapse? Is that your question? Because I actually do not think the Soviet collapse was caused by the United States. I think it collapsed because the internal reasons, and most importantly, it's because the Soviet elite, people like Boris Yeltsin and his colleagues, they wanted to live the life like the Western bourgeoisies. They wanted to, because they have privileges. They have party privileges in Soviet Union, but they want to openly enjoy Western consumer goods, Western luxury goods. They want to participate in. They are kind of done with the old system. They're done with the Soviet system. I mean, that's what really triggered the Soviet collapse. I mean, it's a lot of the internal problem with the Soviet Union. The people who are running it no longer believes in this institution of Soviet Union. I mean, this is my take. Yeah,
right, but Carl, we still don't get a clear story on it. Like, if you go back and you research it, some say it had a lot to do with Chernobyl. Somebody said that Chernobyl weakened the economy, right? Now, like you and I, yeah, of course we saw and go, oh, I mean, what are you talking about? But once again, you and I have to accept here that the news that we learned years ago could have been also an element, there could have been a huge element of propaganda as well that has been inflicted to us. Just because now we're in the year 2024 and we got a few years under our belts and we've done, traveled, 100 countries and we've got experience and we got that. I have to go back and I have to look and say, wait a minute, what isn't accurate here? And I think we've had this discussion before where, I traveled to, when Yugoslavia was hit by NATO, the first NATO invasion ever, any time in history, 78 days of aerial bombardment. I was told one thing in the media, and now it's proven that it was something completely different. So if we go back and we look at the Soviet Union, okay, look at this comment here. Look at this comment here. The U.S. Soviet Union then. Let me ask you, why would somebody put this comment on here? And I'm curious. I want to hear from you.
Well, I mean, from hindsight 2020, from where we stand in 2024, we know Gorbachev was naive. He was an incredibly naive person. Like Deng Xiaoping commented on Gorbachev when they met in 1989 in the Great Hall of People. Deng Xiaoping said, "This man may look intelligent, but he's incredibly stupid. He's in fact stupid." But I don't think Gorbachev is stupid, but I think he's very naive. He's very naive about the intention of the West, because at that time he was promised that the U.S. would not extend NATO, push NATO eastwards, and he accepted U.S. at its. I mean, we know that, right? I mean, you're sighing. Why you're sighing?
Because you're telling a country, or pardon me, the Soviet Union. Listen to what you're saying, Carl. And you and I have to accept for a moment here that we have an element of propaganda that's been hit with us in the 80s and 90s. You're saying to me that there was concern about NATO when the Soviet Union had the biggest arsenal of nuclear weapons on the planet. Why would they be scared of NATO?
No, they weren't. They were scared of NATO. So NATO was scared of Soviet Union. They knew that short of nuclear weapons, there was nothing to stop the Soviet Red Army to roll over Europe. But but what I'm talking about, Gorbachev, from his standpoint, he believed, like, he thought what he was doing is making Soviet Union better, by opening up to the more Western influence. Gorbachev, he didn't even plan for Soviet Union to dissolve. Soviet Union dissolved because the leaders of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, the leaders of Ukraine, and leaders of Belarus, they all got together and they said, you know what? If we dissolve Soviet Union, now we became the leader of our country. And we're not playing second fiddle to Gorbachev anymore.
Here's a better comment here. Collapse of the USSR was done by its elites. Regular people didn't want it. Just to let you guys know that, just to let you know that my wife was born into the Soviet Union, and her mother lived in the Soviet Union. And here's where this propaganda comes in again. And I'm glad we're talking about this, because if you talk to my parents, I'm Canadian, and you bring my wife into the conversation and you start talking about the Soviet Union, there's an instant, from my mom's side, there's an instant sympathy of this. I can't put my hands on it, but I know in my mother's mind, just that word Soviet Union has been taught in Canadian and American schools as, not good. Okay, we'll say that, right? And when you talk to my wife and you talk to her mother and you ask her, what were some of the greatest years of your life? And it all goes back to the time when she was part of the Soviet Union. She said, yes, we had struggles, but we didn't have massive mortgages. We didn't have, of course, she said there were times where it was very difficult, but we all had vacations. And you look back at some of these, like, guys, I'm being honest here. I look back at some of my wife's photos with her family during those times, and to me, this was like, they were happy. Yeah. So, and then, of course, we use saying, well, okay, maybe they wanted to, dissolve the Soviet Union because they wanted to go to a capitalistic market. But the average person, Carl, when the Soviet Union...
It wasn't a decision by an average person. The dissolution of the Soviet Union wasn't a decision by the man on the street. That was a decision by the very top, people like Boris Yeltsin.
Right. Yeah. But these guys knew, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but when the Soviet Union, we'll call it, turned into a capitalistic economy, a credit system was given out, a voucher system was given out. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but if you
I remember.
If you were a baker, a policeman, or whatever, you would have kind of like a point system. This point system would allow you to either, own a house and a little summer home, and even today, you will see. My wife is Lithuanian. Some people in Lithuania own massive amount of properties, and when this all, we'll call it, the Soviet Union collapsed and went into more of a capitalistic economy, a lot of people were doing a lot of trading, saying to these people, hey, this system, you got so many credits. How about I give you some cash for that credit? And that's how they accumulated all of these properties. And boy, oh boy, does that sound like another economy that we know, yet done in a different style. The U.S. economy, pretty much owned by an elite type of people, like the billionaires. We'll call it 1%ers. Is that accurate? Am I accurate on this? Right? A lot of the wealth is held by the top.
I mean, yeah. If you today, I think. I think U.S. today is pretty much run by oligarchs. It's a group of oligarchs,
So
and
so
go
we
ahead.
call them billionaires, and the Russians call them oligarchs. But that system has actually now you're seeing Russia come back and being able to stand on its feet. My whole argument is, if they had another 10 or 15 years, okay, as China started to emerge, could that, because now they're big trading partners right now, right? So during the 90s and as you get into the 2000s, we started to see China starting to rise, right? So could China have pulled that region out?
I don't, because 1990. I grew up in China in 1980s. In
This is why I
1980s,
want your.
Yeah, China was still a very poor developing country. I mean, like I keep on telling you, Chongqing in Chongqing, the tallest building was that 3-story Liberation Monument. That was the tallest structure.
I looked at it the other day, and my wife said the same thing. Yeah, Carl was talking about that building.
Yeah, in all of Chongqing, that was the tallest structure. I mean, you can see today how much the physical landscape have changed. Everything was built up after that, after 1990, and mostly actually after 2000. It's a period. So we're talking about the last 20 years that every Chongqing was being built up.
But Carl, that's 9 years. Yeah. That's only 9 years. You see what I'm saying? Like, I felt when I came to Shenzhen in 2001, wow, China was amazing in 2001. Now, maybe not Chongqing, but let's call it, let's call it the Delta, Pearl Delta area, the ZHA, Hong Kong, all that.
Yeah.
So that's 2000.
Yeah.
91 is when the Soviet Union collapsed.
But look, but Shenzhen is very special. Shenzhen was the first special economic zone because Shenzhen started developing in 1978. That's when the Chinese leadership say, hey, let's experiment with the market, the market reform, but let's not like go crazy. Let's just mark out these special zones along the coast. We will wall them off. Back then, there was a physical wall around Shenzhen. To go in and out of Shenzhen, you need special permit, almost like a special passport. Yeah, almost like a special passport. So the idea is, if the market experiment goes horribly wrong, they can quarantine it. It's still blocked off from the rest of China. But Shenzhen happened to be a great success. So then they started to roll out the experiment all across China. So Shenzhen was one of the first to be developed because its proximity being next to Hong Kong. So what you saw in 2001, that was we're already talking about a development for already 20 years. Shenzhen already had 20 years to develop when you went to Shenzhen in 2001. Whereas Chongqing in 2001 just getting started. The real building up of the physical infrastructure in Chongqing was just getting started in 2001.
I just have this feeling like, even Yugoslavia, I mean, how different would Europe be if Yugoslavia... Go ahead.
There was an article, I believe it was in 1998 by Gerald, I believe it's Gerald Segal, who is a quote-unquote China expert. I think it was published is in the Foreign Policy or Economist, one of those magazines. It says, is China a great power or something like that? But his conclusion is no, China is not a great power. China is a middle power like Brazil. We should treat China as a middling power that it is. We shouldn't be like always catering to China's demands. This was 1998, and at that time that was a mainstream view among China experts, and but there's some truth to what he says. Like he couldn't see, of course. In 1998, I think I personally believe China was already on the right path of development. But for him, he was looking kind of in the rear view mirror, and he feels like China is not going anywhere. And the fact that was, I think, even in 1998, China was not big enough to pull through other countries, like especially as big as former Soviet Union. Now, yes, of course, but not in the 90s and not in the early 2000s, I don't think.
But then again, there was a lot of things going on in the 90s, right? I mean,
Sure.
The internet came in. Could that have been something that would have triggered that economy and, made it be able to turn around? My whole concern is that, we look at the power of America's military. We look at the power of, what's going on right now in the Ukraine. And we try to say, where is this end game? Like, we all have friends, Patrick Lancaster, right? I think, has he been on your show yet? Or
No.
Okay, we'll have to get him on your show. Tell me, what is the word? Okay, we'll get back to it in a minute. But anyway, Patrick Lancaster has been in the Donbass area for 10 years. I met him about 8 years ago down in Transnistria. And we went there together, and we spent about 4 or 5 days driving through that region. And we never thought that that region would be in play right now like it is. And for the people that don't know Transnistria is a breakaway country that, they call it Europe's black hole. It's unrecognized, even though people there speak Russian. They use the ruble. They have their own passports, yet they are unrecognized for the moment. Now, when
you're on mute, Alex. You're on mute. Your mic. Unmute your mic. Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me again?
Yeah. Now
Okay.
I can hear you. Yeah.
So when you look at the region there, and you look at Ukraine, do you ever sometimes, because you're a geopolitical guy, take a step back and say, why hasn't this ended? Why hasn't this conflict ended? What the end game for the collective West, all these countries? What is their goal now? They've had 2 years of humiliation, another 60 billion going over. Is it military industrial complex? Everybody's happy with putting money? Like, what are people fighting?
But Alex, like Lindsey Graham has correctly pointed out, this is the U.S. is in Ukraine because they're not fighting Russia directly. They're using Ukrainians as proxy to die for U.S. So as far as U.S. is concerned, this happens in far off lands. Ukrainians are getting screwed, but United States, U.S. elite don't care about Ukrainians anyway. The Ukrainians are just pawns to be sacrificed against Russia. So why would U.S. care? And also, it's right now it's the European economy that's getting destroyed. Germany is getting deindustrialized when they got cut off from the Russian gas. So the German industrialists actually moves their factories from Germany to U.S. So U.S. is actually profiting. U.S. is cannibalizing its own allies, its own supposedly allies in Europe. So U.S., this is not too bad a deal for U.S. Sure, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are dying, but your people in Congress are still making money out of this. They're still making money.
It's amazing, Carl, that we have, in the digital age that we're living in, we cannot get an accurate killed in action number. We can't get it. It doesn't exist. Why are people not asking that? Like, it just does not exist. You go on the internet, you try to find out information. There's nothing. It's like a black hole there. you won't get any accurate number. The only thing you get when you try to find out how many people were killed in action was visit Ukraine, and then it's a 10-point thing how you can sign up for the military. I'm serious. I'll pull it up while we're talking here. It's crazy, but we can't get a body count. And people say, well, why is that important? It's bloody important. I think it's important that people know what's going on there.
Well, the thing is, Ukrainian elite doesn't care about Ukrainian people. U.S. elite doesn't care about Ukrainian people. U.S. elite don't even care about American people. This is a shame. I mean, it's really obscene what they're sacrificing hundreds of thousands of people for what? Like, the Ukrainians are being offered they're basically human sacrifice.
Of course. Look at this here. Visit Ukraine page and look what you get on the front there. How to join the International Legion of Defense for the Ukraine. Okay. Scroll down. Okay. This is crazy.
For the people who actually voluntarily went to fight as mercs in Ukraine, what can I say? This is like Darwin. You won the Darwinian Awards. I mean, this is.
But look at this, Carl. Foreigner between the age of 18 and 60 who has combat experience and no criminal record, right, can join the ranks of the Ukraine defenders. Today, Ukraine has new simplified procedures for joining the International Legion. Well, okay. To apply for a membership candidate takes 4 steps. Download, scan your passport, scan your documents, and send the application. I mean, what on earth is going on here? Like, seriously, what is going on here? I mean, we can get a form to fill out to go fight, but we can't get some accurate numbers here. I mean, man, this is pretty worrisome if you ask me. I don't know where and how this is going to end. Your thoughts?
I don't think this is going to end anytime soon. I mean, as long as they can keep going, because U.S. can always print money. I mean, they don't even have to print physical money anymore. They don't have to use paper to print money. They just everything is digital. They just add a couple of zeros, and it's done. But there, of course, all the additional U.S. dollar is not going to help Ukrainian to win. You know, they're not going to. Those money is not going to buy them weapons. Where's the application to join Russia? Russia has enough manpower. Russia has more troops than when the conflict started. They have more troops. They have more weapons. So Russia in a pretty good position right now. It's Ukrainian military force that's been demechanized. They've been demechanized because they're all heavy equipment has been destroyed.
Yeah, I'll bring up this poll that I just recently did on my channel here, and you guys are all welcome to vote on it. Let me just pull this up here. Carl, I think you should do some of these polls on your YouTube channel because they get quite a bit of engagement from people, and people like them quite a bit. But let's have a look at this poll here, see if I can zoom in a bit. I asked a question, will Ukraine defeat Russia with its new 61 billion? And here is the percentages that came out of the poll here. 2% said victory for Ukraine, 71% said victory for Russia, and surprise, surprise, 28% victory for the arms dealers. I mean, this is 1.7 thousand votes. So we really know. I mean, this is pretty accurate, I would say, how people think of this conflict. Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. Yeah. So, sir, we're going to probably have you on next week. I don't know how your schedule is, but I think you and Scott really make round out this panel. Just to let people know, you probably wonder why sometimes I don't look directly into the camera. Soon I'm going to have somebody help me operate this show, but when you have 8,000 to 9,000 people on the show and you're averaging 5,000 to 7,000 comments and you have to run the camera in front of you, there's the lighting to my right and left. There's a lot of parts going on here. You'll probably wonder, when you see banners like this come up on the screen, that's me having to control that. So sometimes I do lose my train of thought because there's so many little segments that go on with these live streams, but we try to make our best effort to provide everybody who watches the show. Just to let you know as well, Carl ZHA is a good friend of mine, and both of us operate these channels. We do the best that we can. I will guarantee you that most of these live streams immediately, within about 5 minutes after we end the live stream, fall into demonetization on YouTube, which unfortunately doesn't help at all with the support. So please check out the links in the descriptions. I will on mine. I know, Carl, you probably have some ways that people can support you. This is really important. The super chats that came in tonight, once again, those go a long way to help us. And for all those people that are in the chat box that may not agree with us or disagree with us, that's okay. Come on in, chat with us, vent your frustration, call us what you want to call us. That's okay. It's the reason why you can see and read your comment there is because we allow it. If we didn't want it in this show, we could easily click it off there and say no. But we're okay, and it's nice to see people engage in conversations and get to the bottom of their feelings and what they think. So once again, thank you everyone for subscribing to my channel, Carl's channel. I'll put once again how to find him. Here he is right there, Carl ZHA. He is a weapon of mass destruction on Twitter, that is for sure, otherwise known as X, for sure. Also another channel I think you should check out is the Duran, Alex Christoforou and Alexander Mercouris, as well as my buddy Patrick Lancaster, who I speak with every couple of days as well. You can see some of his reports on the channel. And thanks again to Scott Ritter for coming on this program. Guys, once again, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and support our channels. I'm going to leave you guys with a nice video. You guys can chat, whatever you guys want to talk about. I'm going to join the chat and get in there, and Carl's going to join the chat. And Carl, what kind of scenery do we want? Should we do, you want Chongqing in the background? What do you want?
Sure, let's do. Do you have a different
Shanghai?
video of do you
want
have
Shanghai? You want
Okay,
Shanghai?
let's do Shanghai. Let's do Shanghai.
We're gonna do Shanghai,
do
guys,
Shanghai.
and we're gonna play a little bit of music here so you guys can chat. We'll play that stylish. It's called stylish. I don't know. I play it at the start all the time. Let's hear it. Let's see if it comes in. There it is. See you guys in the chat. Once again, thanks for coming out. Reporterfy Media, Carl ZHA was in the house and Scott Ritter. We will talk to you guys behind the scenes. Take care.